Welcome. I'm Boaz Hepner, and welcome to Chosen Links. And I'm honored to be your host today. And I have brought together a whole bunch of people from different wakes of life and different alliances. They are all Survivor players from different various seasons. And I very much appreciate them here today to have a good conversation about anti-Semitism, about Israel, about Hamas. And I really appreciate, as a Jewish person with family and friends in Israel, I appreciate all of their alliances towards me and my family and friends. We're going to have a nice conversation, a nice podcast, something that Shane on this chat is very familiar with since he's a big podcaster. And we're going to start, though, with the person that I started this idea with, Dr. Mike, urologist extraordinaire, who is talking to us from a family vacation. And rather than let him break up his marriage from being away from them too long to do this, we're going to have him get a few words in before he has to run. So Dr. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Guys, thanks for having me. I think, it's amazing to see this great group here to support, obviously, a great cause. I think when we started doing this, or before October 7th, I never would have thought that we had to actually talk about the fact that Jews have a right to live and Israel has a right to exist. And when I started talking to you, Boaz, it was that simple. There was just Jews have a right to live, Israel has a right to exist. And the fact that there's so much hate online in the media, and it's overwhelming to a lot of us and to a lot of people out there, means that we need to be a voice in this arena to basically have a very clear message. So thank you, everybody.
Oh, and thank you. And because I know you have to go, do you want to just give us any quick memories you have? I'm assuming you've probably visited Israel. And have you ever?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's an amazing land. It's beautiful. I would encourage anybody and everybody to go there and check it out for themselves before they make preconceived judgments about it. And I think you'll see that it is a free land where everybody lives together, and Jews are not just what the media has painted Jews as being. And it's check it out.
Well,
And
thank you.
obviously, I would say bring them home now.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Well, thank you very much. The rest of us are going to continue the conversation, but we're going to let you run to spend some time with your family.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Bye.
guys.
And hi to everybody else. And really big thank you to all of you guys for making time being here in different places. You've got Albert there doing it in the middle of the World Series of Poker. And we've got the Dragon Slayer coach who's doing this in the middle of some sort of Wi-Fi crisis. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. So let's now just have a fun conversation. It doesn't have to be depressing, although obviously inevitably part of it is. Let me just start by asking you, what makes, well, let's actually start a little bit backwards. Who of you guys have ever had the pleasure of visiting Israel out of curiosity? Any of the,
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Okay, so Julie and Karen and Bob, you three? And Terry. Okay, very cool. Terry, I'm assuming Terry, you didn't fly there, did you, as a pilot?
I did. I've flown into Tel Aviv and some other place in Israel.
Nothing mysterious there.
Not at all.
Okay, wonderful. Now, you four who have actually you guys who've actually had this experience of visiting Israel, what were your experiences like over there? How was it visiting them versus, going to any other country you've gone in the world?
The most memorable part of visiting Israel for me was visiting the Western Wall. In my Hebrew book, when I went to Hebrew school, it had the Western Wall on it. And my grandfather would talk about his trips to Israel. And going there in person was so meaningful. I'm going to cry even thinking about it. It was so meaningful to me to be somewhere where not only my grandfather had visited and had this wonderful experience, but every generation and person that I was connected to within Judaism and being in Israel, I felt that in that moment. And to have this wall, which is actually a very small wall, that centuries of people have fought over this stupid wall, if you think about it. It's just so meaningful to me and to the Jewish people. And so it's just really memorable of an experience. And I'm so thankful for Birthright to be there. And I really look forward to the next time I get to visit Israel and put a nice little message in there, hopefully about peace and prosperity to everyone on this planet, and hope for only the best for everyone.
I'll say that
Go ahead.
Being that we are 0.2% of the world's population, to walk around and realize that most of the people around you are Jewish, I felt such a connection, that because we're just a small group of people compared to any other population. So I felt it was really bonding, and I felt like we were all part of the same club, but not where we would exclude others, because obviously there are a lot of Arabs and Muslims and, all nationalities, because Israel is I think it's the only democratic country in the entire Middle East. And they're very open to all forms of expression. So I don't know, I felt a real connection to the land and to the people.
And just to back up what you're saying with some statistics from the top of my head, which of course I could be wrong, but I believe, as you said, 0.2% of the world's population would be members of the tribe, and 2% of America. And it's funny because people really do have a tendency to feel like, oh, America's got so many more Jews, running the media, running Hollywood, these old tropes. But the reality of it is that 98% of this country, which has strong Jewish communities, like here in Los Angeles where I live, is 98% is not Jewish. And as you said, in Israel, there is quite a mix there. I believe 20% of Israel is actually Israeli Arab, if I recall. So there is a strong mix. And another statistic that's good to know is about 50% of Israel is actually not white. But
yeah, right.
People seem to refer to it as a white country. But anyway, this isn't about me, but I'm really appreciative of that, Caryn. Julie, did you want to say anything about your experiences over there?
Oh, sure. I honestly was there over 30 years ago, when I was 18, and it's probably changed considerably, and I really do want to go back. I do remember it. I spent a summer there, and it was just one of the most welcoming countries that I honestly have ever been to. And I don't think that's because I was just Jewish. I was there with people that weren't Jewish, and just everything. It was very warm and such an embracing community, and really a beautiful country to see. And I do want to go back now, as an adult.
Yes, absolutely. And you can see my wife in the background, who is very supportive of me doing this and not spending any time with her. And Terry, the one non-Jewish person in the chat who has been there, who has flown there, can you give us any thoughts on your experience visiting?
Well, my experience in Israel had to do basically with the military, and when interacting with the Israeli military, it's like interacting with our guys. There's a special bond between us, and you're talking about allies and things like that. It's like as we were one. Pretty cool, pretty interesting. That's the first time I had ever seen that. I don't know, that close of a bond between allies. It's pretty cool.
That's very cool. Now, can I ask you guys now as a general group, and we're going to try to go around so that I can sort of share the wealth with things. Why, as a group, you've all decided that this is a time, when I invited you, you didn't have to say yes, obviously. And I appreciated all of you saying yes. What made you each feel like this is a time you can be comfortable speaking about something that is a divisive issue? It shouldn't be divisive to say, bring the hostages home. It shouldn't be divisive to say, fuck Hamas, to put it bluntly. It shouldn't be divisive to say Zionism is a good word. It just means Jewish right for self-determination. But we all know, we're not naive, that we're going to get some hatred for this. There already is some just from advertising this in advance. people are going to do the whole whataboutism, right? What about this? What about that? Right? You talk about anti-Semitism, what about that? But at the same time, I would like to know, why was it worth it for you guys to step up and do this? Because anybody who thinks you're doing this just to get publicity, they are out of their minds. I know none of you are doing this for publicity. That's counterintuitive and counterproductive. So I want to start with the most non-Jewish looking person on this whole chat, and that's Elizabeth with her cowboy hat. And I don't know any Jewish cowboys, so I'm going to start with Elizabeth, who is from a very, very Christian community over there in Texas. Why don't you tell us what appealed to you about it when I reached out to you?
Well, at first I said no because I was like, man, I don't have anything important to add to the conversation, But I think that I kind of view life in general from a more nuanced position. And I think that it helps to understand like each side. And so like there's people that are just in their little echo chambers that have no idea how the other side has their views, and they just shut them down. They don't actually listen and kind of empathize and put themselves in the other person's shoes. And so I felt like it was important to be able to join this conversation. For one thing, I am surrounded by a lot of ultra conservative people, and one frustration that I have in the Bible belt buckle is actually like Israel can do no wrong. And I think that it's very important to break down barriers and walls by admitting when there are wrongs. And so like that for me, like that's something, because I feel like in order for there to be peace, there's going to have to be concessions made, and from both sides, but there has to be discussions. And I think that that's my heartbeat for this, is to have an open discussion. And dude, anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's a problem. And the fact is, like, Israel has always had conflict around them, but there's over 8 million Jews throughout the world. And so if the anti-Semitism and all of these marches and things like that, that's breeding hatred. And I'm anti-hate. I'm pro-Israel and I'm pro-Palestine. Is that possible? I don't know, but like I guess. And but that, I'm not saying that there's not good and evil on either side. So I think that there's both. And I just think having a conversation is just important, and that's why my 10-year-old kid, she told me today, she was like, "Mom, I'm scared for you." And I was like, "I'm not scared. This is a conversation." And so we can be brave and have these conversations.
I actually appreciate you mentioning if it's possible to be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. And my answer to you would be absolutely. The problem is it's just not happening enough. So, for example, my very next seminar, or it's not seminar, my very next one of these is actually going to be a roundtable like this with Palestinians. That's all it's going to be, because I found Palestinians that want to speak up about wanting a true peace with Israel, and they're all going to speak up about Hamas, against Hamas. These are people that actually want peace over there. That's really important. Are they going to have only good things to say about Israel? Absolutely not. But I'm okay with that, because we need more people like them who are willing to speak out against, at risk of their lives. It's really brave of what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
When I recently, my most recent one of these, because I'm all over the map in my themes, I just look for themes that I think need to be said. My most recent one was 35 university students from across the country talking about their experiences, and these were all Jewish students, experiences with anti-Semitism on their campus, from UCLA over to NYU. And the interesting thing was, I asked them all a question. I said, "Do you consider any of the protests on your campus to be pro-Palestine?" And they all uniformly, this was the only question that they all gave the same answer to: absolutely not. They said those protests are simply anti-Israel. They are not pro-Palestine. They are anti-Israel. And I have further evidence of that from these Palestinian men that I'm going to be speaking to, and women, that they've actually gone to some of the marches to try to talk them down and say what you're doing is not helpful. And these Palestinians are thrown out. So
yeah, well, it's fascinating to me that a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Israel created these hate crimes and that they've broken international law." Well, so has Hamas. And so it's like there's like a double standard there. They're both guilty of blowing up bombs, I think, and so it's like I don't know, man.
I
You know
appreciate
what's odd is 18.1% of Israel's population is Muslim. So when Hamas and Hezbollah are throwing missiles and rockets, I mean they're killing their own people. 18.1%, that's not an insignificant minority. That's not an insignificant minority. And what upsets me is the lack of, I don't know, I never heard of Israel like cutting babies. And you don't know half of what you read is true, but about what happened on October 7th, you don't really hear that about the Israeli army doing that kind of thing. And I think they're much more caring about life and trying to preserve life and go after specific things and not just bombing. And they tell in advance, leave. You should leave now. Because
it's very, very important that you're saying you don't hear about these things. Well, I actually, in my chosen links, see a lot of information from all over the place. Trust me, people are putting out disinformation out there. There's plenty of people who try to claim things like, oh, Israeli army is also raping civilians, but it's all been disproven. But it doesn't change the fact that people believe what they get, not even what they read, but what they get to swipe at. Because let's be honest, most of these protests are being run by people who aren't reading, they're swiping.
Well, Boaz, that's kind of honestly, not to jump in, but the reason that I wanted to be on this is because I believe that's kind of the crux of this issue and a lot of our issues is I think the most dangerous people are people who are zealous and aggressive without knowing information, right? And I think that's a lot of what's happening here is it's emotions, it's feelings, it's unrest, and then it's just misinformation. So listen, I come from a first generation Cuban American family, right? My family fled communism in Cuba and sought freedom in the United States. And coming here to Miami, Florida, well, not here, but where I live in Miami, I have so many great relationships with Jewish people, my best friend, my business partner, I mean, person after person after person. And I was confused. I'll be honest, I don't have the statistical knowledge or the factual knowledge that I feel like everyone on this panel does. And I didn't understand how and why this hatred towards the Israeli people happened. I generally couldn't wrap my head around it, to the point where I had to ask my Jewish friends, I was like, please explain this to me the way I have to explain to people who've never understood the crisis in Cuba, why the Cuban people have been so, decimated and impoverished. And I feel like, Boaz, that's the heart for me of this whole thing, is providing facts, providing clarity, and letting people know that, hey, listen, this is exactly what's happening. Don't listen to the noise. Don't listen to all that, stuff, because a lot of that is really just distractions. It's a way to get people riled up, because when people are misinformed and they're zealous, they make poor choices. And when that disarray happens, that's when people in power who want to take advantage and leverage those situations really profit. So that's kind of what the big reason I'm here is to help you guys, those who know much more about this than I do, provide really good information for those that want the facts.
Albert, don't put yourself down as being ignorant, because you really aren't. And I've had conversations with you. So I really appreciate you being on here quite a bit. And you and I both have bonded over both being somewhat politically homeless, both being people that appreciate things in the Democratic side, appreciate things in the Republican side, and not ever feeling like one side is something to idol worship. No pun intended for you guys. So I really do appreciate all of this. I think there's a lot of added value. If somebody comes up to me and says, "What's Biden done good?" I'll tell them things I think Biden's done good. They say, "Well, what's Trump ever done good?" I'll tell them things I think Trump did well. And so I just think things have to stop being, as you said, so polarizingly extreme. The term that I kind of coined a few months ago was radicalized ignorance. People have radicalized ignorance, and they're going around. And what I grew up hearing, free Tibet. Remember, we all heard free Tibet from Richard Gere and all these people and celebrities. I grew up and I was like, I don't know anything about Tibet, but we didn't have crazy protests all over the place. You just had the people who actually learned about it. Unfortunately, now everybody feels like they have a right to yell at somebody else. I can't imagine going up to a BLM march and screaming as a white man at a bunch of people who are from Africa, things about Africa. I would feel like the biggest racist asshole, and I would be if I did that. But somehow people feel like it's okay to come up to me with a kippah on my head or wearing a Star of David and scream at me about my only Jewish homeland. It's very disconcerting, and it's beyond off-putting. It makes me feel unsafe. Coach, you have taken this on day one. You said yes to me. You were instantaneously, you and Richard Hatch, who couldn't be here for other reasons, were instantaneous yeses. You put yourself on the poster happily. You took it on Instagram happily. I would love to know what makes you such an ally to me and to my people.
I think, discrimination of any type is unacceptable. Persecution, shedding of innocent blood, regardless of race, gender, color. You see so much of that. Albert said everybody feels like they have a platform now because they can, take pot shots at people from behind the screen. I like equality. I like what's right, what's fair. And so when you asked me to do this, it reminded me, first of all, I flashed back to October 7th or 8th when I put an Israeli flag on my Instagram, and immediately the zealots, as Albert described them, just, I saw the followers drop. I saw people spewing hate. And anytime there's an initiation of hate like that, there's a festering sore deep beneath the soul that is causing that to happen. And so when I saw that reaction, then I started looking, I started investigating to come up with my own conclusions. I lived in a bunch of different countries growing up. I haven't had the privilege of going to Israel yet, but I lived in communist Russia. And I know that when we were there, somebody came up to our family, and the first thing they said is, what do you guys think about living in Russia? It's such a great country. And of course, it was a terrible place to live. They said, I know you guys stand in soup kitchens for, hours a day just to get one piece of bread and one bowl of soup, because that's what the media had propitiated to them. And so they were under a completely delusional state. And I think that most of society today lives in a delusional state. And so I came here to, just speak about my feelings, my support, to support you and all my Survivor alum, knowing that what's happening right now is unacceptable, uncalled for, and people need to be held accountable for it.
Well, for the 2% of the world that is, or for the 2% of America and the 0.2% of the world that's Jewish, we all thank you. I can assure you that however many followers you lose because of the haters, you're certainly going to gain ones from at least us. And I very much appreciate that. And by the way, to Elizabeth's point before, I told her when I spoke to her, and it surprised her, I said to her, I'm not going to agree with every single thing that you say as a criticism of Israel, but I don't really care. That's fine, because it's all part of the conversation. And I told her, I made her a promise, and I'm making you all a promise. You will not see anything here be cut out except for literally errors where somebody wants me to start over. I will not be editing this out. This entire thing is going to be out there for people to see, including something that somebody might say that I don't agree with. And that's what has to happen more of. We need to have more of that dialogue. Speaking of that, our smoking gun over there, Mr. Shane Powers, who does a great job of speaking and who looks almost clean shaven today compared to his norm. I want to know, Shane, what is your deal and what makes you join us today, which we appreciate?
Well, I'm here for a few reasons. First of all, Terry asked me to do it, and I'm an auto yes. Terry doesn't ask me to do very many things, so he was like, "All right, will you do it?" I'm like, "I'm in." And then I had to think about why I would be doing it other than Terry asking me yes, because if this wasn't going to make sense, I wouldn't do it. And I've been in love with a Jewish girl for, I would say, 4 years. And so I have been culturally surrounded by, a woman of the Jewish faith. And I just know that for right now, she needs to feel safe. And so this is what I can do, right? To show her and to show her family and to show very, very close friends of mine that are of the Jewish faith that there are advocates and that there are people that stand with them. And, it's interesting. The first question that you asked was, has anybody ever been to Israel? And I haven't been to Israel, but the big reason why I haven't been to Israel is because it's scary, or I'll get blown up, or I'll get shot. Like, it's dangerous, right? That is anti-Semitic. Whatever that I have learned through the media or through other people, like, I know for a fact, because I have friends that have lived in Israel, that are, that travel to Israel. It's like the safest place in the world. But because of the, anti-Semitism just exists. It is, right? We're in a flare-up situation currently right now because, young people in America typically are the most passionate and they are the most driven. And when they get a hold of something, young people in America can move mountains, right? They can, like the late 60s. But from where I'm sitting, young people in America have been mismarketed a terrible lie, right? Which is that Israel is bad and they don't have the right to defend themselves. In the meantime, there's hundreds of thousands of people were being butchered in Rwanda 2 decades ago, and no one cares. And Russia and the Ukraine is fighting, but no one really cares about that. But we, for whatever reason, because of the media, because of thoughts that are still in, because of why does Israel not have the right to defend itself? Why does Israel not have the right to strike back and say, yo, we want our hostages? And if the Palestinian people are going to continue to allow Hamas to live amongst itself and it's not going to police itself, then what other option does Israel have in order to confirm their own safety? And listen, I know there's things on the other side, and I understand that this is not a one-sided thing, but currently, right now, in America today, young people in America that drive most of the culture stuff, the social media stuff, they have been mismarketed to by I don't know what. And that's a big reason why I wanted to be here today too, is because I want to learn. I am desperately curious, right? I do not have any answers. I try to form an opinion based on all of the different things and understand that I want to take a look at it from the other person's point of view. But I do know this. I know that on a cellular level, my girl doesn't feel all that safe. And I've not experienced that from her until this happened on October 7th. And so I want to be here to kind of understand or learn more or figure out if there's one solution that I can do so that I can take it out into my life so that I can try to be of some help. That's all. And I want her to feel supported, and I want her to feel loved, and I want her family to feel loved. And I want my friends who are Jewish who are scared. I have Jewish friends in Hollywood, in LA, that are scared, and that has never happened in the 35 years that I've lived here. So I'm here to be a part of the solution. Even if being part of the solution is saying I don't know, and I want to learn, and I want to just be a part of something that is trying to do some kind of solution-based good. And that's why I'm here.
Jane, I think that's beautiful. That actually, I mean, I genuinely am moved by what you said, and I'm not being trite. And as a Jewish person, I obviously do identify with your girlfriend, I don't know what term you're using, but your girl's fears. We all are dealing with it our own ways. I've been dealing with it by being proactive and trying to put out Israel education out there, and I'm specifically trying to be one of the few people out there who are giving information on the left and the right, some of which I don't even agree with, just to give good information. And my wife, on the other hand, is like a lot of Jewish people out there. This might be what your girlfriend's like. Her way of coping is by turning it off. She cannot handle it. She's just having anxiety attacks reading all of this and seeing this. So she's very supportive of what I'm doing, but she won't even necessarily watch this later. And I am okay with that. I'm at peace with that because we each have to have our own coping mechanisms. So I think it's a beautiful thing, the reason that you're joining us. And I think it's a beautiful thing that you're doing it for an individual who's a human to you. And Caryn just had to leave us because she just became a grandma and is going to go help take care of being a new grandma, which is wonderful. So mazel tov to Caryn. Yeah, literally this week she became a grandma, which is wonderful of her to be here. You know, we all have our own shit going on, our own good and bad things going on, but I think that reasoning you have there is beautiful, Shane. Now, you actually mentioned one thing, which was going to Israel as being you know, seen as being unsafe. You know, it's funny because I grew up hearing all of those types of things. And I remember at some point somebody actually did a case study, and obviously this is not during a war, right? It wasn't during post October 7th, but they actually showed side by side that like LA at any given day, at any given time of day, more dangerous walking any neighborhood, including Beverly Hills, than Israel. So like, you know, you just take that idea and you're like, you're afraid to go visit. Are you afraid to visit LA? It sort of reminds me of how I used to tease people when I was doing COVID education, and they would say, what about all the risks of the vaccine? And I'd be like, well, statistically, do you drive to the pharmacy to pick up Tylenol? Because that's more dangerous than the shot itself. Like, there's always things in life that are true. And yes, you can get blown up in Israel. And yes, you could have a side effect from the vaccine. And I'm pissing off people on the left and the right by making those two statements. Trust me. There's a lot of pro-Israel people who are going to hear that and are going to be like, I was okay with him until he said that. But the point is, you know, yes, there's a lot of just bullshit things thrown in just as scare tactics. And I agree. A lot of that is probably for anti-Semitic reasons, which is just the media making it look terrifying there all the time. Ironically, during this war, I think you guys would agree that that the media is almost never showing the safety issues in Israel now. There's rockets. My relatives are in bomb shelters every single day right now. Their kids are sleeping on the floor by their parents' bed because they are having panic attacks because there's air raid sirens, and they're running into bomb shelters in the night, in the middle of school. That's happening in Israel every single day in the beautiful city of Sfat in the north, in the artist colony, coming from Hezbollah, by the way, not Hamas, that one. And we don't really see anything about that. We just see what the big bad wolf Israel is doing to try to neutralize the threats. So it's ironic that they spend most of the time showing how dangerous it is in Israel, but when there's a war happening to Israel, all they've shown is how dangerous Israel is as the perpetrator. You can't really win. You can't win. But I want to talk less, but it's hard for me not to say stuff when you ask things. I want to now go with Shane's question. Shane asked a question, and I actually want now to go to some people who haven't spoken yet. Maybe we can start with Bob. Why do you think you have any answer? You can speculate. Do you have any answer? And then we can go to Dale. Why, to answer Shane's question, do you think so many people in our wonderful country, in our democracy, where we believe in higher education, why do you think there are so many young people who don't even believe Israel has a right to defend itself or exist? You want
to? I would hope the number is slightly skewed towards supporting Israel. You know, unfortunately, a lot of times people make the most noise are not necessarily the majority, and I don't know anybody among my the group that I know that have have the hatred for Israel, and thank goodness I've missed some of the anti-Semitism, although it sneaks in when you least expect it. And so I'm hoping that it isn't as bad as it appears, but also I don't want to be naive and possibly, it just one person's hatred can do so much to hurt an entire group, and so that's one of the reasons why I came on, is just to try to help show that I support Israel. I do understand. I think one of the biggest problems in America is they don't differentiate between Palestinians and Hamas. And there's a huge difference. And because of the lack of understanding sometimes causes problems. I also can understand that Israel is desperate to eradicate Hamas, and they are in the collateral damage is substantial in some cases. But like you implied earlier, there's so much misinformation going around, and that's one of my biggest frustration is not knowing, thinking I know the facts because I've got it from a secure or trustworthy point of information. But and so I think what you're doing here is helpful. Having us talk, having us express support, frustration for any hatred of, it seems so prevalent. But right now, my son is pretty good, is visiting from California. And he said, Dad, I've shut this stuff off. Just I'm concentrating on my family and my children. And among I was talking about among his community, they're busy. They're busy dealing with life, and they're not getting involved in this. And in one part, it makes his life a little easier. In another part, we all sort of have an obligation to fellow human beings, whether you're Jewish or Catholic or Black or white. Hatred in any form is not acceptable. And
it's true what you're saying, Bob. And whenever I have people say to me, what about where is the allies? It's kind of a fine line, because on the one hand, we really, really value when allies like a lot of yourselves, not everybody non-Jewish, there's Julie right over there. But the point is that we do, on the one hand, really, really appreciate when we have our allies and miss when we don't. But on the other hand, all of us are guilty of not being allies to everybody all the time, right? We're not at every single cause and every single time. So technically, Native Americans can be upset that I didn't sign some petition one day, and the Latino community can be upset that I wasn't at a march another day. None of us are always allies all the time, unless it's your full-time job as a social justice warrior. I think the bigger problem that Jewish people are having since October 7th, and really before that, is in my mind, I'm not offended by the people who didn't say much. They weren't really warriors, and they're just not warriors now. Fine, they're just not paying much attention. My problem, personally, and from most friends that I know and most Israelis I know, are the many people, especially young people, who actually identify as social justice warriors, who actually are at every single women's march and every pride parade and every single BLM march. And now it's like, where the fuck are they now, when we're literally raped and babies burnt in ovens and hostages that are still gone? Like, where are they now? And it's worse than that. It's not just that they're not marching with us, it's that they're marching against us. So it's this backwards sort of, to quote Seinfeld, it's kind of bizarro land. We're in bizarro land. We're suddenly like, what's up is down and down is up and black is white and white is black. It makes no sense to us. And that's kind of what Shane was coming with, was he's trying to understand, please make sense of this. How can up suddenly be down and down suddenly be up? Because we Jews are terrified about this. And so so I appreciate those of you who are coming into this saying, I don't have all the answers. That's part of the reason that I'm over here. Great. I wish more people were intellectually curious. It's what we need. We don't just need talking heads like me. All right, I get paid as a nurse. I just do this to bring your voices out, and then I don't know how to keep my own mouth shut. Dale, let's have you tell us, though, for yourself. Although, Elizabeth, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, that one thing, it's in some ways there's similarities to Survivor, because it is complicated. You can watch it on TV and you're like, wow, like how the heck did that person vote for that person? Because you're not seeing the whole story. and you have alliances. And the thing is, the number one motivator for anybody to get worked up about anything, for anybody to do something, what is it? It's fear. And so there's this narrative that if you're really good, you can be tactics and get in there and preach this fear narrative. And the thing is like, we're all people. Ultimately, that's what really matters. But if we see someone as a label, then we are already going to be hearing whatever the voices that are screaming the loudest, that's what we're going to hear. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I got to do blah, 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 because if not, blah, 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 just like on Survivor. And so it's a fear-based narrative, and that's just as simple as it gets. But slogans,
I like the way you pulled that in, because every one of you guys know, and I know even as a fan, how much the edit can affect the way somebody sees somebody. And I've even heard things that I'm not going to repeat on here from some of you guys that I've talked to over time saying, oh, you don't want to invite this person because they might have looked nice in the edit, but we actually know some pretty awful things that they've said and done in life. So like, I was like, oh, good to know. I'm not going to invite that person to this chat because they've like quoted Hitler on social media, things like that. Like, so it's good. It's a very good point you make about the edit, because that's what social media is. It's your algorithms feeding your confirmation bias. And basically that's just a very fancy way of saying it's your edit. So I actually like that. I'm going to have to use that in one of my articles at some point. But thank you. So Dale, we haven't heard from you at all, and I would like to. So you have to unmute yourself, though.
There we go. I'm coming from a different standpoint. Like I say, I'm not Jewish. I've never been to Israel and that sort of stuff. But one of the more memorable points of my childhood was watching the Olympics. It's coming up, Summer Olympics, and the 1972 Summer Olympics. And that's the first time I was introduced or became aware of. At that time, it was a PLO, which I think is now morphed into Hamas, but it was Yasser Arafat, I think, was in charge of PLO at the time. Anyhow, for those not aware, some of us, there's a couple guys here that look about my age or a little bit older, but the PLO raided the Olympic headquarters and kidnapped 10 Israelis, and they supposedly had the negotiations in place, and they showed this on live TV at the time, because I was sitting in the living room watching with my parents and family. The helicopter is taken off with the Israeli team when a PLO terrorist walked up and threw a hand grenade in the helicopter. Negotiations were done. They were going to release them. And they showed that helicopter burning on top of the building for some time. And so ever since then, I've kind of followed it. So I guess I'm a little bit jaded to the one side. I don't trust him. I know there's, and part of that led to Yasser Arafat and was the prime minister of Israel beyond
Begin,
Israel at the time.
Menachem Begin, maybe.
Menachem Begin, yes, and came to the peace accords under Jimmy Carter, which didn't last long, because I think there was doing a peace ceremony and there was a shooting and people were killed on the podium. Anyhow, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so there's a lot of history there that, I mean, that impacted me. That was when I was 12, 13. And it seems like every time we get a peace accord, there's one group that's consistently broke the agreement. And I don't have the answers. I've never been there, but it's sure, I don't know. I guess it's confusing. It's went on this long without anybody able to find a solution. I guess that's the hard part. There's got to be acceptance on more on one side. I guess I'm kind of partial to the Israeli side, to accept that some people have a right to exist. And I don't think there's a lot of those people that believe that way. And that's kind of scary to me. And for the young people, they need to really research their history before they start doing this to the sea stuff. I mean, that's not a slogan. I mean, that's serious shit they're advertising. I mean, you're pushing people to the sea. That's no line of defense. So
yeah, it's the official slogan of Hamas. You can look it up in Wikipedia.
Yes.
And it's pure genocide. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for them to blame the Israelis for doing that, no, that's not it. Because you look at the division in the population between the two countries, this one is a lot more open society than these guys are. You aren't letting any religion live in your country, but these guys don't care who lives in there as long as you do the background and that sort of stuff. So don't tell me who's committing genocide. So anyhow, that's.
No, I appreciate that a lot, Dale. I really do. I mean, I genuinely, when I started this with Dr. Mike, was praying that it wouldn't just be Jewish people. I am so impressed and flattered that it actually is mostly not, because of course most Survivor contestants are not Jewish. So everybody watching this, assuming they don't hate Israel, is going to be very heartwarmed, because I don't know that there's ever been something like this before, where it was mostly non-Jewish allies doing more than a little trite, like, I stand against anti-Semitism thing, which is nice as well. Bob said something earlier. He said, people confuse or conflate Palestinians with Hamas. And he's absolutely right. And what also goes with that perfectly well is people conflate the Israeli government with Israelis. And it's crazy, because people don't conflate Americans with the American government. They don't just suddenly switch and say, oh, Americans all like Biden or Americans all like Trump. They just know that there's Americans and there's whoever the president at the time that you like or dislike. And somehow, isn't it interesting that when people decide to say, whatever Israeli government is choosing to do, clearly they're going to now demonize the Israeli people for it. And the interesting part about that is we've seen very left-wing Israeli governments, we've seen very middle-of-the-road ones recently, and now we're seeing probably the most right-wing one there is. And yet, no matter which type of government it is, people who hate on Israel hate on Israel. And let's remember, when these protests started on these campuses, they did not start when Israel started to fight back. They started on October 7th. There were literally banners up that were pro-Hamas on October 7th on college campuses. So this really, for most people fighting it, it is not actually anything to do with Israel's response. It has to do with simply Israel existing.
Well, thank you. I just got a phone call and I got to run. So good to see everybody again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale, very much. Kelly, we have not had a chance to listen to you. You have been unbelievable throughout this. I've enjoyed thoroughly getting to know you and being friends with you. I believe you have a best friend who is in Israel, and I'd like you to tell us about what this means to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for reaching out and inviting me, and thank you for doing this. And yeah, like you have family. My best friend since childhood, since I was 10 years old, the same age as my son, lives in Israel. She is, well, not obviously, sorry, I shouldn't say obviously. She is Jewish, and she has lived there for over 20 years. Her husband is Israeli, and they have 4 kids. And, you had said earlier, oh, why are you doing this? Publicity. And that was just kind of laughable to me. I have not had the opportunity to visit her. I've, planned multiple times. It just hasn't worked out, but I've, kind of have gone, lived vicariously with her for 20 years there. And, I've heard of other situations happening. And, like you said, I mean, they have a bomb shelter in their house, and I talk to her daily. There's been many times over the course since the war where I've been talking to her, where I've heard sirens, I've heard things in the background, and, I've heard oh shit, I got to get off the phone. And then I haven't heard from her for hours and hours. And I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? And that's our daily thing. Let me know you guys are safe. Let me know you guys are okay. Her husband is ex-IDF Special Forces. Her oldest son just turned 18 right before October. He is waiting to do his basic training in the military. So they only do the training several times a year. As Boaz, you probably know, many of you might know, it's mandatory military enlistment, for males when they're 18. So he's waiting
for Jewish males specifically.
For Jewish males, sorry, yes.
The large percentage of the population that's Arab,
yes.
They actually do not forced to serve the military, although many of them, including the Druze population,
but they choose to. And
exactly.
that's what I was getting to. And she had asked me, I want you to talk about my son. So just to back up, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Number one, what's happening is wrong. it's absolutely wrong. It's wrong what's happening to Israel. It's wrong what's happening to the Palestinians that are innocent and not for Hamas. You know, this war is wrong, but I can't remember who said it in the course of all this. You know, Israel's the only country who gets attacked for being attacked. And what's happening to Israel, what's happening to Jewish people all over the world, it's wrong. And I can't not stand by and at least not say something and not say, hey, what's happening is wrong. And I'm against it. And I support Israel and I support Jewish people and I support my friend and I support her family. And people may, you know, I've had way more love for me speaking out and saying than I have hate, but there has been some hate and that's just too freaking bad. You know, what I try to stand by and what I try to teach my son is if you see something wrong happening and you don't say anything, you're just as bad. You know, whether you're hated for it or not, you need to speak up and say, you know what, this is wrong. And it is wrong. And, you know, I don't have the answers, but I have been very well educated in what's been happening for years and years, you know, through my friend. And what I hear from her, you know, she goes to the hospital, her doctor's Palestinian. The man who comes and works in her house is Palestinian. You know, she'll send me videos all the time of like, yep, no apartheid happening here. Yep, no genocide happening here all the time. So to, you know, to hear from her and her family, this is not, you know, Israel and Jewish people are not, you know, the big bad monster. So it's just, it's crazy, the misinformation that's out there. Like I'm shocked. I am shocked by people who just aren't educated on history and are just so quick to, you know, river to the sea and all that, like you're talking about. It's like, do you even know what you're saying? It's just horrific. And I think, so just, you know, to back up, you know, for her, you know, what she wanted me to share was, you know, her son voluntarily went into the military pre-October 7th. And right now he's doing his volunteer service until he can do his, you know, what's considered basic training. And he volunteers at a group home for people of various, you know, mental and physical disabilities. And she asked me not to share the town, but it is very close to Gaza. It's almost Gaza. And he is there voluntarily working, taking care of these people. And when the attacks happened, of course, you know, her biggest fear was her son, who she didn't hear from for days and days and days and days. And finally, he was okay. And he did have the opportunity to come home to where the family's house is. I've been asked not to say where they live either, but he did not have to go back. He could have stayed home, you know, safe with his family. And he didn't. He chose to go back to where he was volunteering. He's not getting paid at this group home because he said, Mom, they have, you know, a lot of the caregivers were actually killed. When some were kidnapped. And he said, Mom, I have to go back. I have to go back. I have to take care of these people. If I don't go back, they won't have anyone to take care of. And I'm afraid that they will be attacked and they can't defend themselves. So for an 18-year-old boy to, you know, voluntarily want to go back and serve and care for people and stand up for his people, to me, just speaks volumes. So yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that a lot. I'm going to go a little bit out of order because Albert is about to run, so I want to let Albert say any last words he has. He was in the middle of playing World Series of Poker when this started, so we're going to get him in from while we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad I took away a moment away to come and join this. This has truly been an incredible event, and I just want to say, guys, like from where my heart is, I feel like when dissension happens, when human beings are pit against one another, only evildoers and bad people win. And I feel like at the heart of everything happening here, that's really what we're trying to put out. The message is the Israeli people are good people. They're peaceful people. And this dissension, this turmoil, it's something that if we come together, create information, create understanding, education, we can all, from all walks of life, like you said, Boaz, it's not just Jewish people supporting Israel. It's people who have a conscience, people who believe in what's right. If we can all come together from a place of common sense and a place of being a good human being, man, there's a lot that we can accomplish. So I'm very privileged to be a part of this, and I thank you guys for all contributing your time.
Thank you, my
Well
Cuban
said.
American friend. Appreciate you very much. Very much.
Well said.
You know, the frustrating thing about this whole situation is that Israel, by protecting itself, and you know, it'd be like if I picked a fight with Terry's going to come back over the top like 100x, right? And which is his right to do to protect himself. And so Israel has just done that. And now we have an entire generation of Palestinian boys who are going to grow up with an ideological, granular hatred for Israelis. And it's like the cycle just we never get a minute to just stop the cycle, ever. Like these, you know, the Palestinian, these children are they're going to hate Israelis for the rest of their lives. And the people that are creating this are people that don't even live in Palestine. They live in palaces. It's just, the whole thing is so insanely frustrating because there's never any space for a solution, ever. And so I guess I'm just, I guess I get, you know, it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
Yeah,
It's frustrating.
I fully agree with you. I don't think anybody, the most right-wing or left-wing person that I know who is a Zionist, could possibly say that it's not frustrating. And I don't know an actual way out of it. I mean, sure, we'll get out of this war at some point, but whether or not we get the hostages back, whether or not, you know, Israel, however they set up things in Gaza afterwards, let's get rid of the logistics for a minute. To your point, I don't see any possibility, and this is kind of what Hamas wants, right? I don't see Hamas wants radicalization. They're getting exactly what they wanted. Even if Hamas doesn't win, Hamas won. They already won, right?
Yes.
They won because they've created hatred to Jews. They're happy. They win when there's dead Jews, and they win when there's dead Muslims because they get to say, look what the Jews did. So it's a win-win from their point of view, which is why they have the whole human shield thing, because it's a win-win from their point of view. And at the end of the day, how do we ever long-term big picture get out of this mess? I don't know. Obviously, we have to get rid of those bad people on top who are being, like you said, in palaces in Qatar and places like that. But on top of that, as you said, even if, let's just say we had like certain children in Gaza or in the West Bank who weren't already radicalized, now they're probably going to be, right? Because now they've lost their uncle and they've lost their this and that and so on. So now, is the solution that Israel bellies up and dies? I would say no.
Of course that. I mean,
there's no solution.
I get into it when I get into any kind of conversation or I talk about a problem. I always want to sort of figure out if there's anything I can do on a solution base, and it's just to continue to educate myself. And when people have conversations about things, to try to do your best to have logical thoughts, like, you know, explain that Hamas and the Hamas terrorist network and the Palestinian people are separate. You know, educating yourself and just continuing to talk to people about it, you know, and to not get upset and not get emotional, because that's, you know, emotionality just brings, when two people are emotional and they're trying to, you know, they're trying to talk to each other, that no one's listening, right? So it's important I want to be able to do one thing from this conversation. And I guess it's just to continue to educate myself and to have an opinion and not be afraid to speak out about it.
And you're doing the second thing too, because by doing that, you're giving a voice to other people who are going to watch. And I always like to say the silent majority are not the loud people who are screaming their comments on the left or right. They are the people who are scrolling through and noticing that, maybe pressing the like button. That's who I care about here. I don't actually care. As much as I will not enjoy the negative comments, there's already been the like Holocaust didn't happen comments on the poster. You've already got the like genocide, the what about this, what about that? Even the ones that aren't bots. It's awful to see, and you try not to let it bother you, but it bothers all of us. But the reason that we all have to keep telling ourselves we're doing this is because we're not trying to change those assholes. We're trying to change and help educate and give a voice to all of the people who are actually just not actually sure what's going on. And that's most people. And the sad truth is we're never going to actually see all of them because they are silent, but we just have to know that they're out there. And I promise you they are.
I
No,
think just one more thing very quickly, and then I'll shut up. I think that, young people in America today very much more relate to the Palestinian people because they're, for whatever reason, I think there's more of a shared idea of victimization, right? Like I don't know many Israeli people that come from a victimized place because they've not had the room, right? Like 80 years ago, they were almost eliminated from the face of the globe. So there's no victimization. I mean, clearly I'm generalizing, but like the Palestinians come from a very victimized place, and young people in America today are based on all of the misinformation and all of the different stuff relate because I think young people feel more than ever victimized instead of taking responsibility for their own plight. And I just don't see, Israel may have been a victim to October 7th, but they didn't come from a victimized place, right? So it's harder for young people to relate, I think, to Israel and the Jewish people because they're responsible for their own safety. They're not poor me. They're like, we've got to figure this out. We were almost eliminated, and there is no discussion about like get with it, figure it out, fix the problem. Like it just seems to be that young people in America that are driving this noise relate to the Palestinian people in a weirder way than they would with Israel.
Well, they definitely do in overall because there is the idea of DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusivity. I might be screwing up the acronym, but DEI, which has been around for the last decade or so, it kind of has a semi-basic framework of everybody being either oppressor versus oppressed. And if you're at that age group, none of us here are at that age group, right? I'm 45 years old, so I certainly didn't grow up with it. But for people who are growing up, really formalizing, shaping their minds in the last 10 years in primary school, elementary school, high school, and college, they've really, really been drumming home this idea of DEI. And DEI kind of reminds me to some degree of sort of what our age group dealt with affirmative action, which was like very well-meaning, but we all saw it kind of go left when it was trying to go right, and right when it was starting to go left, and it was starting to like sometimes hurt the people that it was trying to help. And we saw that it didn't always, sometimes veered off course, right? So what we see with the DEI happening is that everybody is either oppressed or oppressor. Well, everybody's got to fit into that, but there becomes no gray area. So what in terms of, I could go on for 2 hours and I'm not going to because this is not my panel, but Shane, in terms of one of the reasons you're asking about why are these things happening, why do people see it that way? It's not the only reason. There's multiple facets. One of the facets is going to have to do with Kotter money coming into colleges. One of the facets is going to have to do with social media algorithms and confirmation bias. But one of the problems, one of the issues that at least Jews have been talking about a lot since October 7th and before that is the DEI problem, because what we realized, you remember I kind of asked a question which was a bit rhetorical, which is why are all these social justice warriors marching for everybody but marching against us? It was kind of a rhetorical question from my point of view because I know the answer. The answer is that with DEI, Jews have come out on the shit end of the oppression stick. We're seen as the oppressors, and therefore the Palestinians are seen as the oppressed. And that's kind of what's happened as a result, when in reality, it should just be that everybody is seen to some degree as oppressor and oppressed. Like, why does it have to be that everybody is black and white? Why does it always have to be? In the case you were mentioning that Israelis and Jews are not really, I forget if you use the term oppressed or what it is.
No, they don't come from a victimized place. Like they're not waiting around. Like they're not coming from a victimized place in their life. They're like, we've got to figure this shit out. We've got to work it out. We've got to take care of our people. We're surrounded by 7 fucking countries. that want to kill us. I know that everybody might have the luxury of being a victim, but we don't. Like, we have to take care of ourselves fucking now, and we've got to make sure that our people are okay, because 80 years ago we were almost wiped from the map. So I'm saying Jews don't have the luxury of coming from a victimized place.
Right. We're not going to we're not wallowing. Yes. Sorry, Kelly.
No, you're fine. No, I was
Yeah.
just agreeing with you that, Jewish, people in Israel aren't like, oh, they're not screaming helplessness.
Correct.
Yeah, they're not victim card. And that's where that resonates with the young people in America, kind of like what you're saying, Shane, is it's like, and the whole like victim and then the oppressor and the oppressed. And it's one thing that's pretty easy is you look at the map and you see like Gaza is this like tiny little thing, and like people want to like support the little guy. All right. But the thing is that a lot of people don't realize that Hamas is supported by the whole Arab areas, the other countries that are massive, that have a ton of funding. And it's not Hamas is not just associated with this little strip. All right. And so it's more complicated than that. And I think that's where people want to make it not complicated, but this is a very complicated situation. And that's honestly kind of where I want to encourage people to be more curious, to acknowledge that it's not complicated, because you're doing a disservice to everybody by just saying, oh, it's just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and you see
Not
the little
acknowledged. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you see the little sliver of Gaza, you're right. And if you take out the map even more, you see the little sliver that's Israel. Israel is a tiny little sliver surrounded by Egypt and Jordan and all of the different countries around it that are at best case scenario have like a stalemate of a peace with them. There's no love lost there. And as you say, just to clarify one point you said, Elizabeth, Hamas is not it's not that all the countries around them are supporting Hamas. Most of them actually hate them. Most of them actually hate Iran. It's that they're coming from Iran. Iran is kind of the big bad over there, and they're the ones that they're the ones that have what you call proxies. Hezbollah is their big proxy in the north from Lebanon. Hamas is their big proxy in the south from Gaza. And there's more than just that. There's the Houthis out of Yemen. So Iran is kind of the big bag, to use like a Hollywood term, like a big bad guy. And that's why Israel was actually just on the verge of making peace with Saudi Arabia when October 7th hit. They were about to do that because Saudi Arabia and a lot of the countries there have a mentality of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And a lot of them, as much as they don't like Jews, they really don't like Iran. So Israel is actually, if I'm going to give a little shout out to optimism, because it's hard to be optimistic right now, it's that God willing, Israel will get out of this to some degree by continuing to make normalization agreements with other countries that hate Iran more. Does that mean Israel's suddenly going to pay like wonderful hand in hand? No, but you know what? It starts with a stale peace, and it becomes more and more normal, right? It's all about getting people used to things. So you look at some of the ones they already did this normalization with, which was under Trump. He gets credit for that. And they did, and they actually, I know Israelis who've gone to visit some of these places, and that's wonderful. And they have like kosher markets opening in some of these places. So I think the way that we actually move forward here is by starting to sort of figure out strategic peace with other countries. And then I don't know how to make a way forward though for the Palestinians themselves. I don't know how to make them hate less, because as we've talked about a few times here, we're going to keep defending ourselves. That's going to end up causing deaths, especially since it's an urban war where they're using human shields. So there's no way for there not to be collateral damage. So then you continue the cycle where now you have people who now want to join Hamas as soon as they're old enough. So it's a very hard situation. Now, Julie, you are the last man, so to speak. You're the last woman standing, the last Jewish woman standing over here. I would like to know, to take a little bit of a zigzag here. One person did ask me to ask, did you experience or witness any anti-Semitic incidents on Suvivor? But specifically, besides that, more realistically, did you experience any anti-Semitism because you were on Suvivor?
Oh, interesting. No, I really do believe on my season, I think I was the only Jewish person on my season. I like my memory now, it was a good few years ago, so I can't really remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I was the only Jewish person. And I kind of noticed it, like it's something you might notice, like whatever you are, right? If you're the only one in a group. But it was never anything that was actually spoken about or talked about. It really, religion honestly did not come up on my season in any form. There were not a lot of conversations around it. And no comments were made to me. So no, I did not feel like on Survivor, I experienced any anti-Semitism, you know, with my experience, at least on the show.
What about the community? What about social media and so on? Has that been kind to you in that respect?
It has probably not now, like after this, in terms of like, I'm really, really quiet on social media. I really only I post personal stuff, maybe a picture of my dog, right? Or it used to be my kids. I really have not gotten political in any sense ever on social media. And I think maybe that's just about who I am. I'm a pretty quiet person, like in my everyday life. And I think I do shy away from controversy. And so when you first contacted me, the first thing I said, like my son is now 18, he's about to go off to college. He's a huge Survivor fan. It's just been his dream for 10 years to be on Survivor. It's one of the reasons I did it. Like, because I was like, how cool if he could see his mom on Survivor. And you know, the minute I told him like that you reached out to me, I was like, I'm about to get canceled if I do this. And he was like, who cares? Like, and I was like, you're right. Like you know, you know, he's grown up. I have two kids. They're teenagers. They've both grown up in New York City. It's obviously, he talks about sometimes how he can't stand that everything is so polarizing. And that it does feel like what Elizabeth said at the beginning of this, that you're living in an echo chamber. And he, you know, he has some strong opinions, but he wants to talk to people that see things differently. And he wants it to be a conversation and a discussion. And especially living in New York City, where like politically it leans very, very left where we are. And he believes in a lot of the things that those people, you know, believe in, but he doesn't necessarily want to hear it all the time where any other opinion gets shut down. You know, there's kids in New York that are afraid to speak up in class because the teachers or the students lean so left in terms of their upbringings that you don't feel like you can have a voice, right? If you don't have that same common voice. And so to be able to like have discussions with all different types of people and hear other perspectives, you know, is what I would hope for. And living in New York over these last months, like since October 7th, and seeing these huge protests, and they're just screaming and chanting and marching, and you just feel like there's no reasoning there. Like they don't want to hear anything but what is like huge tunnel vision. And it's pretty like upsetting, like, you know, to live through and to see. So, you know, back to you asked me if I've seen any anti-Semitism on social media. Not really, but it's because I'm a pretty quiet person and I just don't really speak up about much. You know, I do read a lot, but I just have never been very vocal. So I don't think I've ever been a target of much.
Now, you mentioned to us that politics and so on didn't come up in general. I'm curious about the rest of you guys. I believe Kelly is the next one who actually has to get going. She's in the middle of a lot of studying right now that she's told me about. So I'm curious, Kelly, how have you, first of all, I want to know, did politics come up on your seasons? I feel like nowadays it probably comes up more often than when you guys played. And second of all, how have you dealt with surviving the polarizing nature of social media?
Yeah, we didn't talk about politics too much on either of my seasons. Yeah, social media, it's, you know, it's a love-hate relationship, but you know, as I mentioned before, I've had way more love than hate. You know, I have had some people say, oh, you know, you should use your platform you know, to help and not harm. And to those people, I just respond, hold on. You know, I don't think you actually know what you're talking about. You know, I'm not, because I am pro-Israel and because I am in support of Jewish people does not mean I am pro-war and, you know, you know, everybody, you know, needs to die. And I think what I was saying earlier is, you know, what Israel is not recognized for in all of this is just, you know, sort of swept under the rug. all the good things that Israel has done in support of the Palestinian people, all the things that are in place in Gaza or were, pre-October 7th, and that is because of Israel. The amenities that Gaza had, that was not, put in place by Palestine. That was not put in place by Hamas. And I forget who said earlier, maybe Shane, there's horrible atrocities happening all over the world right now as we speak. And nobody's, speaking out against that. Nobody's marching for that. It's like Israel can do no right now. It doesn't matter what they do. All of a sudden there's rules, there's rules in war now, and Israel has to play by them, but nobody else does. This is a war, and Israel does have the right to defend itself, and I won't back down from my stance on that. And that's, what I have to say. And I said very early on, right early on during the attacks, I said, let me be very clear. I stand with Israel, and if you don't like it, unfollow me. If you don't like what I have to say, you don't have to listen to it. But I am, I am here to learn, and I want to know more, and I'm open for discussion, but I'm not going to, glorify what Hamas is doing. I'm not, that's my same question. I'm like, where are all the feminists? Where are you? Where are you in the raping and the mutilation of all these women, and men and babies and hostages? Where are you? I don't hear you right now.
Yeah. And the families over there definitely don't hear them. It's pretty nauseating how long it took for agencies, even the UN, to come out and actually acknowledge there were even rapes.
The idea that Israel has to fight a war and also be moral about it is ridiculous. Like if some Mexicans paratrooped into Texas and fucking killed Americans and snatched 100 Americans and went back across the border, we would fucking flatten that joint, and we would go get everybody, and there would be no one would say shit.
No one would say a word about it.
Why does Israel have to fight a war with some kind of moral turpitude or moral high ground? It's absurd. How about this? It's anti-Semitic. It's just it like I said at the beginning of this, it just exists. Anti-Semitism exists.
It's a double standard in caps, in not even capital letters, but in caps lock. There's not even a question that we could throw a dart on any other war of engagement, of any other battle, of anything small or big. And I don't believe there's ever been another country, including ourselves, which we've been involved in plenty of wars here in America. I don't believe we've ever been held to the same standards that Israel is. Israel is just always expected to basically be shat on when they are fighting and shat on when they are being slaughtered. Essentially, when they are in charge, they're shat on, and when they are the victims, they are shat on, and they hate us no matter what. And yeah, how we mourn. The Israeli people mourn. I can't tell you how many relatives I have who are utterly feeling despondent when they see images of what's happening in Gaza. And let's forget about all the disinformation. Let's forget about the bullshit images. Let's forget about when I can't tell you how many times I've seen videos and images of things that happened that they're saying, look what happened in Gaza, and it's really like 2015 Syria. Okay, for a minute, let's just forget about the disinformation. Even just the true things that are side effect, horrible collateral damage. Israelis, for the most part, are devastated by it like the rest of us are, but at the same time they're like, but what do you want us to do? We are literally getting attacked every single day. They literally still have over 100 people, most of whom are probably dead at this point, and the families want to know and want to bury them, and they continue to literally use human shields. The only thing that I can possibly think might be less bad about this next war that might happen with Lebanon is at least it's not as densely populated. So at least maybe it won't be as hard for them to fight, as Shane says, a moral war. Maybe they'll just be able to have a war. I'm sure they'll still use human shields. Hezbollah is just like Hamas, but at least In Gaza, it's like good luck, because if you look at what Gaza is, it's like Manhattan at all times. Everybody's on top of everybody, and Hamas literally doesn't let you leave. You want to leave, they don't let you leave. They literally are making sure that you will die so they can say glory to our martyrs. It's awful. I mean, they're literally building tunnels below playgrounds, and below preschools, below hospitals. So it is impossible for there to be a moral war fought here. There is literally no possibility of fighting this war in a way where you can make sure that the other side, only the bad guys die, and still at the same time not have your own people feel defended. That's the problem here. They're actually trying to fight a moral war. As much as people would like to say that Israel is committing genocide, Israel is actually trying to commit a moral war, as far as I can tell from my pretty deep research, more than America has ever tried to fight a moral war, by the way. So this double standard is absolutely massive. I actually really want to hear from Terry, because I believe, I might be wrong, I believe Terry is the one person in this chat who actually is military. And I would really like to know, Terry, your attitude about what the hell is expected in warfare that's not other than what we're seeing now.
Well, you know, Shane brought up a good point. Stole actually one of my examples I was going to bring up here. So, what do you do? What do you do when a country on the other side of the border, they're run by a group of people that were voted in over 15 years ago. Their charter says they're going to destroy your country. They've lobbed probably at least 20,000 rockets over the border over these past bunch of years. Suicide bombers, you name it, they've done it. It's been horrible stuff. It's been horrible stuff then as retribution, Israel back at them. But in the long run, these people were voted in. And let's just say that country decides to come over our border and show up at Coachella and take out 1,200 of our people, rape and pillage them, drag them all the way across the border through the desert naked, and then hold them hostage on the other side. Exactly what Shane is going to do. We've had enough of this. We're going to wipe you out. And it's a horrible situation for some of the Palestinians. The other Palestinians voted these guys in office years and years ago. There's been a bunch of wars with a lot of bad leaders that their people went along with bad things. And then eventually bad things happened to their country. So what do you say to the person here who's protesting or anything else, maybe at a university, and go, did you go to Coachella last year? I heard you went to Coachella. What if they came in there and took out 1,200 of you, raped and killed 3 of your best friends? How would you feel about that? Well, you can imagine their ideas would change a little bit. But also one other thing, Julie's brought up, Boaz you brought up, and then also Shane brought up, is the safety of our own citizens of the United States. I've served to protect their rights to protest, but then also rights to religion. And because your specific religion, there's a war happening on the other side of the world, but your specific religion, so you're all chunked in with that. And that's bullshit. Nobody in this country should feel ashamed or afraid to be who they are, regardless of what you believe maybe about what's going on over in another country. That, oh my God, well, the religion is based over there in Israel, so yeah, you're all part of it and you suck. And yeah, no, that doesn't happen in this country. And that's one of the big reasons that I decided to join this thing, is you don't get the right to make our people feel like crap just because they're Jewish, or in other situations just because they're they're gay, or this or that. You don't get that right. You can talk about it, you can have an opinion about it, and maybe you shout it out sometime, maybe in a field somewhere. But for you to go make one of our citizens feel that way, total bullshit. And that is one of the big reasons I am here, because that pissed me off. There is no reason that Julie's kid or somebody else's kid who happens to be Jewish has got to feel like they got to walk on glass, or they're walking on glass going into a class at Columbia or University of Maryland or UVA or any big major school where a lot of this stuff is going on. And to me, it's a horrible situation, and people got to smarten up. People got to get educated and find out why these situations are really happening and why this was the last straw. And it is the last straw driven by a terrorist group that was voted in by more than 50% of the Palestinians in the first place. Are there lots of good Palestinians? Yes, there are. Are there lots of bad Palestinians? Yes, there are. And there's a terrorist group running their country who for the past 15 years gives zero shits about what their kids are growing up and learning and the love that they should be having, instead of spewing hatred every single day in their classrooms to the littlest of children about, you need to go hate Israel, you need to destroy them, and that's what we're going to do. So until they learn to love their children, it's probably never going to happen. And the final thing I'm going to say is, historically, we dropped the atom bomb on Japan. We beat up Italy. We beat up Germany. But those people don't harbor ill will against us or the Israelis or anybody else who happen to have taken them over or destroyed their way of life. There's got to be education following on this. How do you get over it? It's hard to talk about. But just like Shane said, it's like, that's it. That's the last straw. You guys, Hamas is going to get destroyed one way or the other. And that's what Israel's going to do until they get their hostages back, a ceasefire, or Hamas is destroyed, one or the other. So it is a tough solution for anybody to swallow, but most solutions are.
Terry, I'm not done with you because I want to ask you the question, but you brought up something that I literally just Googled because I wanted to get it right. Most of you, if all of you, have heard this before, but it's worth repeating again. And you'll see why I'm saying this. You just alluded to this. Famous quote by Golda Meir, right? And look, Israel, look at this. Look at this crazy country in the Middle East. They must be terrible. They had a female prime minister before England did, all right? Famous Golda Meir quote, when peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us. That is exactly what you were fucking saying. And that's and exactly right. And when you're talking about education and indoctrination, I know we had in our other panel, somebody read up a quote about this, but I think it's important to drive home that UNRWA, right? UNRWA, UNRWA, it's UN's Palestinian Relief Organization. No other organization in the world is there for relief for just one people. They have their own one. And literally, we have proof that they were participating in October 7th, a great deal of the people that are doing it, that they are literally, we've seen for decades. Hillel Neuer is the head of UN Watch, and he has for decades been going and beating his drum saying, we are finding textbooks that UNRWA from the UN is using to teach Palestinian children. Look what it says about Jews. Look what it says about Israelis. It's literally filled with blood libels. And that's what a UN-based organization is reading. If we're ever going to move forward from this, we have to start with the children. And I don't just mean the children not dying. I mean the children not being educated in a heinous, blood libel-filled way, which it's very hard to come out of that. I have made friends with a Palestinian, with multiple Palestinians through this. I mentioned I have a panel coming up. It took him decades to get these ideas out of his head because it literally becomes something where it's just, there's a cognitive dissonance. If you grow up with one thing, right? If any one of us, we've all grown up in America, but if all of us, if right now I tried to tell you that, you know, up is down, you'd have cognitive dissonance. You wouldn't be able to wrap your head around it. I don't blame somebody who is raised to hate Jews for hating Jews. I blame their teachers. The problem is I'm going to blame them next because they're going to be the next teachers, right? It's just, it's awful. It's really, really awful. But we really, really need to do something about UNRWA. That's for damn sure. Now, Terry, getting back to you, I just want to clarify a point. since you are the military representative here. If the equivalent happened, and by the way, the equivalent would not be 1,200 people being killed at Coachella, because if you look at population size of Israel, the equivalent would be something like 70 times bigger, right? If you look at percentage of Israelis that were killed based on how many the population.
Right.
Because they said that this was like Israel's 9/11. It was actually like exponentially more like a 9/11 for them. If such a thing were to happen, and let's even just say it was just 1,200 people killed at Coachella, would America, knowing there was no way to just get the bad guys, knowing that the bad guys were using human shields, would America, even under Biden, would America just scorch earth?
They wouldn't just scorch earth. I don't think they would have to justify, oh, this is a moral war or whatever. They would just, there would be a mission objective here in order to destroy the heads of Hamas, and then work your way down the chain. I don't know if Israel is also running like PSYOP stuff where, preaching to the Palestinians that are not on Hamas's side, you need to help us, you need to direct us, we need your help to make them go away for you, so that you can then enjoy your life and teach your kids not to hate, those type of things. So, you know what? Put it this way. If the situation was reversed and we the United States had a little sliver of land next to us off one of our borders, we would know everything about it. We would know where everybody was, and I'm sure Hamas, Israel has a lot of that as well. But it would be over, like Shane said, we'd flatten them. It would be over quickly. And yeah, would we occupy it? Oh, hell yeah. Because in urban warfare and stuff like that, there's still people with crazy ideas and think, that kind of stuff. So I'd like to say we would have been all over it in a heartbeat. But and again, you're looking at a small area like the Gaza Strip that has been doing this for over 50, counting the PLO, you're talking back to the 70s and 80s with Arafat, and then further on, up the past 15 or 16 years or so with Hamas. They've had their ear to the ground with all that kind of stuff. But in the long run, it comes down to an entire people, over 50% of the Palestinians backing these guys, and they had, they had their chances and everything else like that. The U.S. would not be, it would not be a lot of mercy.
They would not be sitting on their hands too long, I'm sure. And I forgot, and even though I was using as my example what you said, which was about all the deaths, but really what I think I'm doing a disservice by saying it that way, because what would really be lighting a fire under it, what lights a fire for Israel, it's not revenge, it's safety, of course, but it's also the hostages, right? So I forgot to mention, if this happened in the US, of course, that would be a key element, is like, we still got to get them. Like, we got to get our hostages. That's
right.
Way more than just 9/11, right? 9/11 was terrible, but it was all about dismantling Al-Qaeda and blah, 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 blah. There was nothing about hostages to get back. So they were able to deal with it slowly.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
question.
Now, Bob, we haven't heard from you for a very long time, and you are our last remaining winner who's still on here, so we have to pay deference to you. And I would very much like to know, for all of you, starting with Bob, do you see any major, what would be like the biggest challenge for Israel right now if you were running PR for them? You became Israel's PR firm. And I'm going to tell you, I think Israel has always had a shitty PR through today, from before today. I love Israel. Boy, sometimes I sit there and I just wish I was doing their PR for them, because I'm like, why aren't you saying this? Why aren't you showing them this?
I think that Israel, right, for so long has been attacked and minimized and belittled, discriminated against. And so I understand, it's in the Pentateuch, right? An eye for an eye. It's in Exodus, right? First 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. It's in the Pentateuch. But unfortunately, I feel like they take that to the next level, right? And so we all know who started this, but it seems that the retaliation is so swift and so brutal. And of course, I'm not suggesting turning the other cheek, because that's not what's necessary. I like retribution. I like not retaliation, but I certainly like, you know, to, I don't know even how to phrase it, not even the score, but I mean, if somebody wrongs me or my family, you better believe I'm going to protect what's mine. So I understand that part, but I feel like they go above and beyond. So, you know, that's one thing probably. I think another thing, you know, just people understanding the culture, understanding the history, and, you know, I'm not talking about like propaganda, but some type of marketing where people get to understand, you know, how much they've had to persevere over the centuries.
What do you think, Bob, from where you're sitting?
Well, one of the things I was going to encourage people to do, even now, I was going to say, after this whole crisis is over, to go visit Israel. I had the incredible privilege of visiting Israel, and Julie pointed out she was there 30 years ago. I was there 40 years ago, and so I'm sure things are different, but it is such a beautiful country. It's got such beautiful people, and whenever I go to a country and sort of get immersed, and I always told my students, when you go someplace, don't stay at the Hilton Hotel, stay at the Airbnb, stay with the people. And I was just so impressed with, one of the things that impressed me the most was driving across the desert, and somebody took out a green magic marker and ran it across the ground. And it went from desert to absolutely lush fields of vegetables and farmland, that the Israelis did just an amazing job of utilizing their country. But between the people, which I found really friendly and wonderful, and the history of Israel, you could spend your life there studying the history. And I would just really encourage anybody that has a chance to go visit Israel, even now. I mean, it's not the safest time to be there, but your chances of getting hurt are probably worse driving through Manhattan, you know, to get some Advil because you got a headache. And then, but if they went there now, they'd also understand what the Israelis are going through. I mean, they're here, you know, the air raid sirens going off, and it would give people a better understanding. And I just think encouraging people to go to Israel now and in the future, and just understanding, you know, meeting the people, understanding the people. It was one of the, I've had the privilege of going a lot of different places for a little kid that grew up in Maine. But we spent almost a month in Israel, just, you know, we were backpacking it and tenting. And it was an incredible experience. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is I just sort of feel a connection to Israel. And I think encouraging people to go there, encouraging people to actually meet Israelis and not make a judgment on what somebody told you about Israel or what somebody told you about an Israeli. Go there and see it. And I think that would be the best thing because the more people that go there and understand the issues that Israel has, standing there, you know, and looking across the border and realizing the guys with rockets over there, and this is why Israelis respond the way they do. It's such a complex issue, and I just think the best thing to do, and all of us have suggested it, just trying to get the best and most accurate information about what's going on, and you've said it over and over again, and I think it's so true. Just because let's use Netanyahu's name. Just because Netanyahu may be somebody that you don't like and you don't care about and you think he is a problem, okay. But he's not Israel. He's Netanyahu any more than Trump represents me or the entire United States. He only represents probably half of them. And the same with Netanyahu. I don't know what, but don't judge Israel on a politician, or even a single situation like this Hamas war. And you're right about Hamas. Israel can't win. Hamas, if you kill the innocent Palestinians, Hamas is happy about it because it makes Israel look bad. And there's nothing that Israel can do really. But I think they really need to, and I don't know how to run a war, but I think they need to do their best to reduce the collateral damage. And I think I don't know. It's just one of the most frustrating things because I can't even conceive of a solution. But it's almost if Mitchell could have done it in Ireland with the Catholics and the Protestant, how they ever stopped that after they were killing their brothers and sisters and blowing people up, and somehow Mitchell went over there and said, "Hey guys, let's solve this problem," and it certainly has calmed down there. And I just don't know who you could call to come in and say, okay, let's somehow come to grips with the hatred that's the war causes. I mean, I can understand Israelis absolutely hating, well, Hamas is no question about it, but mistakenly hating Palestinians because they're related to Hamas, and certainly Palestinians who you mentioned earlier, whose whole families have been wiped out because Hamas was hiding in their apartment building, and the Israelis took out the Hamas fighters, which they have every right, and I support them taking all the Hamas fighters out, but trying to do it without as much collateral damage, because it just pits sort of the world against Israel. But again, what I like to say is it's one of the most beautiful countries I've been to. Great people, and no place has more history than.
I love it, Bob. That's so good. I actually, for whatever reason, didn't occur to me somebody was going to say that in terms of PR, visit, but it's so obvious, and it's such a good thing, right? Because as it's sort of like you know how it's easy to be annoyed at the driver who's trying to come in, but as soon as they make eye contact and wave at you, you always let them in. They always let you in because it's putting a human to the situation. And of course, you're going to let the person in who just waved to you, unless you're just a total animal, right? But when you're not seeing them, you don't make eye contact, you can just be a bit of an asshole. Well, Israel is just a state of mind to most people. They're not real people. They're just these Jews, these privileged white people, even though more than half aren't white. It doesn't seem to matter. You're absolutely right, because I've spoken to so many. I'm a nurse. I work with all sorts of people in the hospital, including many Filipino nurses, none of whom most of whom are not Jewish. And a lot of them have visited Israel, and they love the place from their travels. You speak to people who have visited, you get that bond, it hits your heart, and it's very unlikely now that you're going to just dehumanize the whole country and just stereotype the whole people, right? So it's, just like it would be a lot more just like you would not imagine that if somebody went to visit an African country, they're probably going to be a little bit less likely to have some of their inherently racist ideologies that they would otherwise have. It's all about making people more human. And I think that's a beautiful and obvious suggestion that should happen, which is just tourism. Have tourism happen more. And I'll give a shout out to my brother-in-law, who's in bomb shelters every day, but whose job is as a tour guide over there. Obviously, he doesn't have anything going on since October 7th. As a result, there's not much tourism. I don't know that I would necessarily say this is the right time to go. I know you said that. I don't know if somebody really wants to go visit right now for pleasure a country where they're going to be dealing with air raids and bomb shelters all the time. But certainly if they want to go as volunteers to be like do-gooders and help, I know a lot of people who've gone to Israel now because all their farmers are gone or at war and their factory workers are gone at war. So I know people from America who've gone there to literally pick the crops in the fields because somebody's got to get food into the stores, but everybody right now is at war and everybody knows somebody who's been murdered or kidnapped or raped. Everybody has a brother or sister or cousin who has. That's how small of a country it really is and how many people have been victimized this way. So I love what you were saying over there. And the only other thing I'm going to throw in is you were saying in terms of popularity of Netanyahu, before all this happened, before October 7th, if you remember, everyone in Israel was protesting Netanyahu. He had something like 75% disapproval. People were protesting in the streets. So he definitely doesn't represent the people. But during war, you get behind your commander-in-chief. That's what you do. And right now, the country has been behind the commander-in-chief to sort of get it done and bring him home. But at the end of the day, if you look at polls right now, is very, 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 very few who don't want him at some strategic point now or soon to be the hell out of office. I will say that. Amongst Israelis, people who judge Israel for their right-wing cabinet right now have their heads on backwards because the majority of the country is literally anti this cabinet. But the majority of people who are anti-Israel are not. Let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. Most people protesting Israel might say it's because of the right-wing cabinet. It's not because of the right-wing cabinet. They've been protesting Israel since we had a left-wing cabinet. You know, that's kind of the irony of it. So I so appreciate what you just said. I was going to call on Elizabeth next because she was writing some stuff, but she just at least temporarily was off of there. So I want to actually ask a couple of others of you. Well, right now, Julie and Terry, is there anything specific that you would suggest other than visiting Israel? Is there anything else that you would say that really would help the PR battle, the misinformation battle?
I mean, I really don't know. I don't have any answer to that. I do like what you guys, the two of you just were discussing about like humanizing it, right? And what necessarily maybe what happened and the people that were involved, except that at the same time, like I live in New York where, you know, the posters of the hostages were put up, you know, after October 7th, and you just see them being ripped down every day. And like you're trying to humanize like what happened over there. And, you know, on October 7th, and people still, they don't even believe it, you know, or they're seeing the images of the real hostages and they just still don't believe it or don't care, or feel like it was justified. So like, I would say anything to do to humanize like the Israeli people. But even then, I just don't even know, like at this point, I really don't.
That's fair. Elizabeth and Terry, I was about to call on you, Elizabeth, when you dropped out of there, but Elizabeth and Terry, do you guys want to add any other ideas you may or may not have in terms of what Israel can do to try to stop losing the PR war as badly as they are? Otherwise, I'll move on to another question for you guys.
I think from Terry, it's education. It's like, I think what we all crave is to get educated. And I think you're right. They haven't done a real good PR plan, but we don't happen to live in that part of the world where in a lot of cases that just doesn't matter, and in some cases they don't care. You're just going to go out and wipe out Hamas and then they'll figure it out after. But I'm hoping, I had given this some thought before, the exit plan. First of all, hostages, bring them home. Secondly, or at least know what happened to them. And then the second thing is the exit plan, a strategy, and what you do down the road for, say, the Palestinians that didn't support Hamas. And the ones that supported Hamas, you know, you made your grave 15 years ago. The ones that don't support Hamas, which is 50% of the Palestinians, let's get them some help and have it not be the UN, make it somebody else. But yeah, but do some PR and say what the exit plan is going to be. This is what we're going to do when we're done. When we feel safe, we'll help you out. Here we go.
Yes, there are ministers in Israel who have been like speaking up and saying like, we're not, you need to have an exit plan, whatever that is. We need to know what that is. And that's been a big frustration to people where they where they kind of don't. And by the way, just to back to something that I think Bob said earlier, I don't think we can any of us on here, we all live in America. Everybody who's on this chat lives in America. I don't think any of us can really, truly know what it would feel like to live in a country where, imagine if Canada and Mexico, imagine if all of our borders literally at least once every like 10 years, not even generation, just started like going on stabbing, murdering, running over you, blowing up the suicide bombing cafes. I mean, I don't think any of us can know. The next closest thing might be Ireland, as Bob said, like the idea of like people who grew up, dealing with like Starbucks getting blown up in the middle of things because the Catholics hate the Protestants and the Protestants hate the Catholics. I don't think any of us Americans who are, especially if we were born here, I don't think we can actually identify with what it would feel like to have that level of lack of security at all times, 24/7, all the time. So for us to be able to judge how Israelis feel in terms of their lack of security and how they feel in terms of like, well, we might feel bad for them, but, and therefore what the but entails, it's kind of asshole judgmentalism there because, and for us to gaslight them and call them genocidal when literally the other side is the one that's admitting to wanting to genocide, it's just, it really is insanity. So I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, Elizabeth, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, of course, I have ideas too about the PR campaign, and I can't help but go back to Survivor because I mean that's just like kind of part of this conversation, you know. And so if you're wanting to get an alliance member to join your side, you can't say this is good for me. You need to vote out blah because it's good for me. You have to frame it in such a way that's like, hey, how is this good for you? And so a lot of times one of the best ways to soften a conversation is to be like, hey, I understand where you're coming from, and these are maybe some things that I've done wrong, but let's get this right, and this is how it's going to benefit you. And nothing is more compelling for in any society than to have freedom. And I think that Israel does stand for freedom, especially when you compare them to the people that are all around them. Like they do have more freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and the women are more free in Israel, and those things. That's the crazy thing for me is like how some of these social justice activists are like siding up with Hamas, because it's like when you look at the freedom, what would Hamas actually bring to the area? Then it's like it's going to be not good for them, and so like remind the people why it would be good for Israel to have more, I guess, power in that area to free them from Hamas so that they can be free. Freedom's compelling.
I love it. I love you bringing in Survivor a couple of times to it, and by the way, you just alluded to, I almost forgot, early on, everybody sees the slogan all the time, Free Palestine, Free Palestine. A lot of Jews and Israelis created signs, and they weren't meant to be ironic. They were Free Palestine from Hamas. I mean, it's so obvious. It's literally what everybody should be saying. Free Palestine from Hamas. That's what the war is all about. That and bring them home. That's literally it. This war, literally, there was a ceasefire on October 6th. Hamas broke it. Israel now will be happy for that ceasefire to continue again when they simply have Hamas gone and the hostages gone. And Hamas is totally in control of that. But easier said than done because urban warfare, densely population, they don't care about their own being killed, blah, blah, blah. The community of social media is obviously pretty damn polarizing. That's an understatement. How do you navigate such a polarizing environment?
I think social media is just so toxic. And as I shared with you, I took time off. I take regular intervals off, sometimes 3 months. If I find myself worried about how many people are liking my posts, if I start getting really caught up, I'm talking like checking multiple times a day. It's natural for us to see, is there any traction in what I said? I think that's natural. When you start checking it multiple times a day, you wake up in the morning, it's the first thing you look at. When I find myself doing that, then I'll usually take at least a month, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. If I post something that's controversial and I lose followers, then I know I'm on the right track because I hit a nerve. You know, being somebody that is outspoken, being somebody that I feel is authentic. You can like me, you can hate me, but one thing is I'm going to be true to myself and I'm going to be authentic. And so, you know, when I think of leaders, when I think of people that do great things, they don't make everybody happy, right? There's going to be people, when you make progress, there's going to be a wake behind you if you're in a boat. So you go to from point A to point B, there's a wake behind you. And so you make waves. If you speak the truth, especially in this day and age, you're going to cause waves. So when I said earlier that I saw the followers start to decrease, it meant that I was on the right track for me. Didn't discourage me, didn't make me think, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. It made me double down and say, oh yeah, I definitely need to be doing this. But social media is something that is very toxic, and it's something that people can now hide behind. Mike Tyson said it really good, you know, social media has allowed people to say things without getting punched in the face. And I think that's, you know, really true, because you wouldn't say those things to me. I mean, how many times, you know, have I had somebody say to me, I want you to kill yourself, you're a piece of shit, you know, coach, I hate you, I want you to be voted off every day. And most of the time I've deleted them, but there's a few times where I felt maybe the higher calling tell me to respond to those people, and without exception, responding to those people, and then they tell me how miserable their lives are and that they're so sorry that they just were having a bad day across the board. I'm telling you 100% of the time. And so you got to take that in perspective, and you got to be true to yourself, and you got to speak the truth, and you got to wake up and you got to say, I've already been canceled. You got to wake up and say, I don't give two shits what anybody thinks about me. And then when you do that, your actions are going to be pure, not motivated by how many followers you're going to gain, not motivated by, is Survivor going to call me one more time? I don't care about that, right? I'd say that probably an astounding number of people that have played Survivor are just sitting there thinking or hoping and praying that they're going to get the call, and they're navigating relationships outside of the game as if they're going to play again. And if Survivor went off the air, 98% of these people, their dreams would be crushed, and their livelihood would be, you know, torn down. But also, they'd stop being friends with about, you know, half of the survivors that they're already friends with. And that's why I'm reclusive. I don't talk to anybody. I mind my own business. Ben Katzman wants to jam, I'll jam with him. Tyson, he's a good friend of mine because we played the season. We went through the trenches together. Albert, great guy. I freaking love that guy. Most underrated Survivor player in history. But other than that, I don't care. I'm not sitting there stroking any of these contestants because I think they're going to be liking their posts and commenting on their posts. I see what goes around. Take a look at it, man. It's ridiculous. I'm not playing any of that kind of stuff. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. I think that's wonderful. I'm sure I'm sure everybody would enjoy seeing that. You know, something you kept referring to, you know, that you struck a nerve when people say something when people respond angrily, that you know you're kind of on the right path. You're reminding me of that famous saying, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is that the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. Like, right? So by getting people showing up with their hatred, it ironically is not actually the polar opposite of love. It's actually showing you that there's something there that's causing them to set off emotionally. And you, amazingly, it's such a coach answer. I can't imagine anybody else has done this. You've reached out to those people and you've gotten them to apologize. That's unheard of. That's amazing. That's amazing. Are there lessons you've learned through Survivor or anywhere else in life that you would like to pass on to all of the people out there like myself who are Jewish and worrying about and experiencing anti-Semitism?
Here's the thing. Life's not that easy. I wake up every morning. I want to be a better man. I immerse myself in scripture. I pray. I meditate. And I ask God to give me strength for the day, an opportunity to be a light for his kingdom. And I ask for people that I can make a difference in their lives. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good husband, but I want to be a good man. The problem when we go through difficulties is we do three things. We place blame, we say, when this is over, then things are going to be better. And my perspective and my happiness, my countenance is going to change. Or we complain about it. The problem with those three things is that we actually miss out on the character forging, sharpening opportunities that exist only in the moments of the valley of the shadow of death. That's the only time that we build our character. I've had so many good highs in my life, but I never grew as a man during those times. When I went on Survivor, I was stripped of everything, my reputation, my good name, finances. I was fired from my job. I was a laughing stock among America. And instead of complaining about it, I buckled up and I said, God, what are you trying to tell me in this? And I learned some beautiful lessons in those dark moments. But when I was winning games and starting symphonies and, doing all that great stuff and on the mountaintops, I never learned about myself. We can only come face to face with ourselves in times of adversity. And so that would kind of be my advice. And it's tied in with Survivor, because some of my darkest moments were after the first Survivor, but those were also some of the most beautiful moments of growth. Another thing is, opportunities exist when you're walking in the valley of the shadow of death that only open sometimes once or twice in a lifetime. And we got to be looking out for those. If we're so into self-pity and self-loathing and complaining about the circumstances, we're going to miss those open doors.
Wow. I see. I knew that was going to be a good question for you, because I figured we can have I have to say though, why were you fired from your job? What the heck? How the heck was that justified from this?
I mean, I left, right? I actually listened. They asked me to come on the show. I said, when am I leaving? They said, we can't tell you, yada, yada, yada. When they finally told me, I said, I can't leave. I was talking to one of the casting producers, and they were like, what do you mean you can't leave? I said, I can't leave. That's like right in the middle of my soccer season. My players will not understand. And they said, they got pissed. They were like, we're going to blackball you. You're never going on the show again. I said, I don't care about your show. I don't care about your show. And I hung up and I told them no. And so a couple of days later, I was talking to my sports supervisor. In the NCAA, you have an athletic director, and then you have a senior women's administrator. I was talking to my SWA and I said, hey, I turned down Survivor a couple of days. And she got so mad at me. She was like, you're going to call them. The team will understand. By the way, they still don't understand 12 years later. Really the only mistake I feel like I made. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. What happened with light? Hold on. Hold on. Wait.
It's a higher power. It's a higher power.
Where are you? Oh, it just freaking shut off, man. What the heck? Well, anyway, this one's not going to be on video, but
no,
so she said, you're going to go. And so I said, well, she said, call them back. So I called them back and they were like, we're not going to put you on the show. I said, all right, fine. They were like, well, wait a second. And they were like, if you give us an affidavit and you talk to a lawyer and you do another contract that you're not going to bail on the show. I said, you got my word. I'm going to be there. So if you want me, great. If you don't, I'm not going to go. They're okay, we'll take you. But I never told my athletic director. So my SWA knew, my athletic director didn't know. So I disappeared for 2 months. The team never won a game after I left. So that's why they fired me. I can understand it. It was painful at the time. It ripped away my soccer career. Actually, it was never the same. I was turning down Division I jobs left and right, and I couldn't even get a job at a community college after Survivor. I mean, because you got to remember when the day and age of Survivor, when it was in that era, podcasts were not really around, right? It was the bloggers that were kind of taking over, and so the people that didn't know any better, they would go to a blogger. They go to somebody's opinion. And they would think that it was fact. So when they said, well, coach is a pathological liar, and somebody was quote unquote reporting on it to these athletic directors that were trying to hire me, they would look at that and they would read it and they would be like, this guy's a fucking lunatic. We don't want this guy. And so my soccer career, I never coached in the NCAA again. And it's, look, again, some people might say, well, poor me. This was a time when God opened up a door that I would have never stepped through, ever. But because I would have never gotten married. I would have just been a slave to soccer. And, my life right now is so fulfilling, right? I conduct a symphony. I got a music studio. I got a beautiful family. Like I wake up every day and I'm so happy to be alive. I'm like, my wife actually was like, can you please calm it down? Because she's too damn happy. But it's like, I would have never found that happiness. I would have gone this whole life without having kids. because I thought that I was supposed to be this, you know, that my marriage was to my soccer teams. And so like that door would not have opened up if I hadn't have been fired and brutalized and pulverized and mocked. And, you know, like all that stuff, it made me look at myself and said, maybe I'm taking myself too seriously. Maybe I shouldn't care so much about what people think. And so there were huge, you know, character moments of beating my character like a sword, right? Like the samurai sword into submission, where it was like, this is the man I want you to be. God was saying that to me. And so like, I'm very happy that all that happened. It was very tough at the time though. Very difficult.
You are a personification of a Jewish expression called Gam zu Latova, which means also this is for good. It's when you get into that car accident and you're saying, how can this be good? My trip's ruined and this and that. And then you look back a few years later and you're like, wow, that car accident gave me the insurance money that I used to buy an engagement ring for my wife. And guess what? That story I just told wasn't a hypothetical. That's what happened to me.
Oh, cool. That's cool. That's
So
cool.
it's Gam zu Latova, and you see the dark times or when you've been able to sort of get diamonds out of coal. I want to now ask two non-Israel related questions because it would not be fair to the fans who wanted to just ask a couple of Survivor questions to you guys who are left. So first one, which you can kind of see as a segue from this. What's the biggest difference you're seeing between, you know how Jeff likes to say that now it's like the new, you know, he always likes to say it's the new wave, the new cast, the new school of going, right? He does all of his cute, amusing, silly Jeffisms. So what's the biggest difference that you guys see between old and new players now? How has gameplay shifted since you were playing? And I do know you've been playing in different eras yourselves, right? Elizabeth and Julie being a very different era from Bob and Terry. So let's start with the older players, and I don't even mean age. I just mean you played years ago. So how has gameplay shifted since your seasons, plural?
Jeez, I'm like ready to answer a tough question and you're throwing a Survivor widget in here. You know, my old school, I think, was a little bit more about the player, you know, player development, character development, not player development. And, you know, to keep things fresh, I can't fault them, you know, to put in new twists and turns. They got to keep it so that people are still watching. You can't really tell them that they're doing the wrong thing, even though for me, I wouldn't make those decisions to put in so many twists and turns. But I think that, you know, fans adjust to it and there's still a bunch of people watching it. But the biggest thing I think is character development and, you know, having the characters be developed versus the twists and turns. And so because of that, the player then invariably adjusts. You know, there was not a single mention on any of my seasons of stacking your resume for the jury. In fact, I was kind of in the era where the person that made the least amount of enemies, the person that had the least amount of blood on their hand would be the one that was the most likable, and therefore they might be the one that was winning. And so that was something, you know, that was always on our minds. Outwit, outlast, outplay. It wasn't about, you know, building up a resume. It wasn't about necessarily big moves. You wanted to have them. Obviously, people understood that was part of the outwit, but it's really become now, there's no loyalty. You know, it's just absolutely go out there and try to pad your moves. And every week you can shift alliances and you can crap on people and it's okay. And, you know, that's, you know, something that I've never played. And I think it'd be a hard time to adjust to playing to something like that.
Terry, you actually, on this chat, what's left, you played the longest to go, starting with season 12. How have you seen gameplay shift from season 12, maybe to 31 when you played again, and now to now?
I went on there for the challenges, and I thought I'd figure out the social game, you know, as I went along. So it was a little different for me. The kids today, it's like they've had 50 years of NFL films to watch, which they did every single one 10 or 15 times to find out how stuff is done. And where we, in the beginning, it was all about, they didn't have a lot of the twists, except we were the first one with Exile Island, but there wasn't much to look back on. I mean, there were a couple of people you like, oh, well, like I want to play like Tom Westman, or I want to play like Danny Boatwright, you know, something like that. We were more team oriented, I think, and less individualist in the matter of, hey, I'm gonna make my resume right now by making this move, and to go a little on with that, you get people in the final, the three in the final, and they can't remember what they did, 2 weeks ago in the moves that they made, and they were horrible advocates for themselves in the final. And it's like, God, it showed like you did a lot of stuff on the show, and you didn't say one thing about it. That's like, you guys, you're horrible lawyers, where I think with, like when Shane and I played and Bob played and stuff like that, it was people stayed together a little bit more for a number of different reasons. It all wasn't selfish. And the one final thing I'll say is, and I know they don't talk about it, but the whole money thing. If you can get 5 people together, and like in Shane's group, they had 6, but basically, except for me, they were all in the money. Like, all right, only one of us is going to win $1 million anyway, but hey, let's all get $20,000, $30,000. The final 5, you start making that much money till the million, and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm all for 30. I'll take the 30,000 as long as I can get in with the 5, and I'll stay loyal because that's 30 grand talking. Nobody talks about the money. The money was everything. It was everything. That's why you go on the show. I think if Jeff goes, all right, listen, yeah, do any of you guys want to take like $80,000 right now and just leave the show? I'd be like, hell yeah. My chances of winning $1 million are like nothing. And yeah, I'll take the 80 grand right now. Thank you very much. People go on the show for a lot of different reasons, but in the long run, it's about $1 million freaking dollars. I don't give a shit about the title of Survivor. I want the $1 million. All right, you can keep the title. Just give me the check. Give me the check.
That's fantastic. Are any of you watching Australian Survivor? Like I am.
I do.
You are. Julie's the only one. I think Julie could tell you that it feels like to most people like the best era of American Survivor. They really, really focus on the alliances, the relationships, really good challenges. One thing that's really interesting, and they have a great host. The one thing that I would say that's really different there, and this is the reason I'm bringing it up, Terry, is that the money, they never talk about this. But if you're paying attention, the money must affect the decision-making. Why? Because as far as I could tell from looking it up, there's no second place and beyond money. It's only first place money there. Second, and they have 24 players. 23 people get nothing. And they're there for, I think, like almost twice as long as American Survivor. So I don't even know how they can take off that much time from work and make nothing, but it is great Survivor if you want to have fun watching. But I can imagine, based on what you're saying, that would change your mindset if you knew that there is no second place money and third place money, right? That would actually affect how you play it towards the end, right?
Yeah, it definitely would. Also with certain challenges, it's like where they do, this is double jeopardy. You get each person that wins this challenge, each team of 3, you win this challenge. It's say 3 versus 3 versus 3. Yeah, you each get an extra $5,000. You want to see people start going crazy and knocking heads and doing whatever they have to do. Yeah, it needs to start going to show me the money. They need to start doing that a little bit more. They need to do that, and then you're going to start seeing people. Because that's one of the things they asked us a long time ago. They go, what would you do for $1 million? Would you embarrass yourself? Would you embarrass your family? Would you do this? Those are questions they used to ask us on the application. You're like, yeah, I'm not embarrassing my family, my job at American or anything like that. It's like, yeah, I'm not doing that, but I am going to kick everybody's ass, that you can write that down,
Gary.
Yo,
did you get a chance to see the Queen on what they call it, the Trader, the show that? Oh, because that's what they did. This is a challenge, and if you sort of all work together, you can get this amount of money. And they would do a challenge, and they're all working together-ish. And they, at the end, they'd say, okay, you've got this much more money. Although it didn't go to them, it just went to the bucket that the last person got. And but see, I fall in a different bracket. I was there for a good time. My handler, when they were going through the interviews, they kept saying, "You got to tell me you want $1 million. You want $1 million." And I got a pretty good life as it is. And I also didn't think I could win $1 million because I was the old guy. I mean, I make you look young, for Christ's sakes. And so I think that worked to my advantage, because I think the kids didn't realize that I really wasn't playing the game in the beginning, because I wasn't driving to win, because I didn't think I could. And then I'm only competitive if I think I'm losing. Same way. And I also got in trouble when I won. Some woman came up and interviewed me as I'm going on the red carpet to get on the plane and get out of town, which drove me crazy. When I couldn't stay and celebrate winning, I had to get on a red eye to New York to get the check in New York. My whole family's back celebrating. But the woman said to me, "What are you going to do with $1 million?" And I couldn't say, well, geez, I don't know. I my truck runs. I got a nice boat. I got a wonderful family. The house is, doing okay. But I had to make up a lie and make it up quick. And it wasn't a lie. I just said, well, Peggy and I have never been on a honeymoon. So I think I should, we planned our marriage on Sunday. We got married on Thursday, and Friday I went to the island to haul traps, and she went to the hospital to do respiratory therapy. I said, no, I'll have to I'll have to take Peggy on a honeymoon. And I think that cost me $30,000 or $40,000. But we went to New Zealand and Australia. It was a great trip.
Love it.
But my problem was I never was really brought up to really do something for money, but I will do anything not to lose.
Same here.
That's fantastic. I went to New Zealand for my honeymoon too. That's where the saddle came off the horse and I broke my elbow on my honeymoon. Ain't that fun? Yeah, but it was an amazing country, wasn't it, Bob? Wasn't it
if you go from this side of the world to that side of the world, you might as well go both to Australia and to New Zealand. And I recommend people go to Australia first, because it's a beautiful country. It's unusual. It's got all. But New Zealand is right off the charts. And if you go to New Zealand first, and you might be a little disappointed with Australia. But what I love about both countries is the expression. They don't ask you what you do for work. They ask you, what do you do for fun? And you learn a lot about a person just knowing what do you do for fun?
I love it. Elizabeth, tell us your thoughts. You were season 37.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the 26-day format has definitely changed how you win the game. And it's produced very different winners. If you look at the last winners, it's like the new era. They're very different than the first 40, I would say. And I think that it benefits the more social players, which I'm not against, but I feel like we need a few more seasons to figure out like that sweet spot of like how to win the game in 26 days. But I think that just simply like, it felt so stressed anyways when having 39 days. We had days where you have to go to challenge and you have to go right back to tribal council, but then we would have a day off, to like mingle on the island and like to build relationships, to talk strategy. And with this condensed format, there's not much room for that, and so I feel like that really, really changes the game, and it creates this higher, fast-paced. You're not thinking as deep, you don't have time to. and to build those relationships. And so I think it's the 26-day format, and I don't really like it, but I don't know. I'm not opposed to the idea of that, by changing that timing, like what kind of winners are coming forth, because it's just fascinating to me, that social strategic stuff. Like, okay, like this is an experiment.
That's interesting, because I never thought about it this way, but when you just described the difference between the days that you don't have any downtime, you don't have downtime, you don't have downtime, I wonder if there's going to be a higher correlation to people quitting as a result. Like last season, there were a historic number of quits in the beginning of the season. Almost every episode to start off with somebody quitting or threatening to quit. And it just made me think at the time, like, oh, is casting just failing? But it makes me wonder if maybe having less downtime, we all need our bodies to reset a little bit. I wonder if making this harder, as Jeff likes to brag, of doing the downtime, I wonder if he's going to end up having just a show full of quitters every year as a result. I hope not, but maybe, from what you just said. That's interesting.
It sounds like it takes all the fun out of it. I'm not saying you go on Survivor for fun, but like, dude, it was kind of awesome to go explore the beaches with your buddies, and go down and see the coral reef. I've never seen anything like that, and it was just like, wow, I can't believe it was. I had room for adventure too.
That's lovely. I love that. And Julie, last but not least, season 38, our most recent that's left here.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing that Elizabeth said. It's something about the faster or the shorter season now. It's very fast paced. There's not downtime days like we used to have. And I think that, I personally am happy that I was on a season where it started as 2 tribes of 9. I think the seasons now, like all the new era seasons, are all 3 small tribes of 6, and there's very little room to hide if you're on the losing tribe. And I think, and sometimes I wonder, some of the quitters, like, I don't know if it has to do with that. Like, they already saw the writing maybe on the wall. I don't know, right? Like, so you almost like give up, like, instead of getting voted out. But or also the quitters, it might have something to do with the lack of food now. Like, they're not given the rice in the beginning. And like, I know my tribe, we took a lot of stuff off the boat. So not only did we have the rice, but we had fruits and vegetables, and we had some cans of food. Like, I ate pretty well the first 2 weeks. And I know that's not everybody's experience, but I think some of these people, the first 3 days, they're dealing with like starvation already from day 1. And I think that they just break down like faster at this point. It could be a reason for the quitting. I don't know. Not really sure.
You're making a great point about shortening it up, which I didn't like the idea, but what you've just been saying, we did the Durham Warriors Survival Challenge, where we played Survivor for 4 days, and they do it now out in Illinois, just called a Survival Challenge, and it's 5 days long, I think. But some of the people that, I never played it, I just ran it, but some of the people that had been on the show said it was the 5 days or the 4 days we did it was more difficult than Survivor, because they were going to 3 tribal councils a day, and there wasn't the time. And what you just pointed out to me makes perfect sense, and that is the shortened, the no free time in between. I mean, I kept copious notes while I was on the show, and there were several times where we had 2 days off, where we didn't have anything to do other than collect firewood and gossip with each other. And if you eliminate all that, and it makes it really difficult. And I was sort of annoyed when they shortened it up, but I think it adds stress, which adds some entertainment.
Right. I think they had to, like Jeff's whole thing about talking about, like, since it is so much shorter, they have to make it harder now, right? They want it to be as hard as it was for us. So since it's shorter, they're just making it tougher from the start. I personally miss like the reward challenges now in the beginning, because now you see episodes where it's just an immunity challenge, and they don't have time to do 2 challenges per episode. And to me, the challenges is like the most fun part to watch and to participate in, for sure. But I miss that, but I don't think it's ever going back.
You mentioned 3 tribes of 6 is nowhere to hide, so maybe they see the writing on the wall. I'm in, as our most Survivor friends, we have our like Survivor chats, the people you watch with, right? And you guys have all experienced that, I'm sure. So amongst my Survivor friends, the 3 tribes of 6 is well, just about one of the worst changes that they've ever done in the show, because essentially there's no interesting votes anymore, with few exceptions. I mean, okay, somebody might use their shot in the dark and 1 in 6 chance they win. Okay, you're basically giving them dice to roll. Okay, so maybe they're gonna play an idol, maybe they won't, but like, think about all of your seasons. All of you guys had at some point votes where there were 10 people you're voting with, or you merge and there's 14 people you're voting with. But now you start with 6, so that's the most it could be. The next time it's 5, the next time it's 4. Oh, wait, we're going to merge. But wait, after we merge, we're going to divide you into people who have really merged and not merged. So it's still, so your next vote is still about 6 people maximum. And the very next vote they do after that, yes, I am a Survivor fan, obviously, right? And the very next vote after that, when they should finally be together, they're going to offer you, do you want to step off and get this rice, and do you want to even be for it? So they're going to have even less people competing for immunity. So no matter what you end up doing, it's like episode 9 when you finally may have a vote that actually is interesting. And it seems that everybody feels this way in the Survivor community, except for, I don't know, Jeff Probst and the producers, who just won't make the change. But everybody seems to want them to go back to having, even if you're going to do 29 days, you're going to have 18 players. Just do two tribes of 9. Easy solution. 2 tribes of 9. I mean, so again, to Bob, Elizabeth, and Terry, check out Australian Survivor. You're going to start with 3 tribes of 8, and they're going to do some swaps. They've done really good twists on the auction. There's some really good stuff that happens in those seasons, and it's fun. People can get pretty acrimonious. Question for each of you, easy question, and you had to know people were going to ask this. Would each of you, if tomorrow you were told you can come back on another season, would you play again? Yes, I am also asking you, Bob. So Bob, would you play again?
As I told Survivor every time they call me up, I am packed and ready to go. Now, right now, I am, you know what the worst part about being the oldest winner of Survivor?
What?
Being the oldest winner of Survivor. Because I physically am nowhere near what I was when I was 57. That was the top of my game. But I would go back in a heartbeat. If Lynn Spillman's, she doesn't do that anymore, but whoever's doing casting, if they're listening, mute me out before I say this, but I would, even if you get voted out first, you get an all expense paid vacation, which Jimmy T always brings up, and I always ask people to ask him about how much fun he had getting voted out early. But no, I go back in a heartbeat, and I think if even with my physical inabilities now, I think I could weasel around, and because most of it, there are been some pretty good winners that aren't that physical, and I'm not bringing the Queen into this directly, but I'd go back in a heartbeat.
Bob, you would have, I believe as a fan that there is less of a disadvantage now to not being as physically able as there used to be, because people used to focus on strength, 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 strength. Nowadays, people, like Terry was saying, is all about me, 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 me. And you can have that first episode, second episode, where it's like, there's the old guy, he's going to be the obvious first boot. And then you see the clever players say, why would we keep him around? He's exactly who we don't think is a threat. So you actually could go further now, I think, than you would have 10 years ago, potentially. But I mean, you are the only winner here, so you're the one who could teach us. So it's pretty awesome. We would all love to see all of you come back. Now, I want to know about you, Mr. Terry. You've played twice. Would you do a Legends season?
Well, first of all, I don't consider myself a legend, and second, seeing that I'm retiring in a couple months and I won't have a job, so maybe I might go back.
Are you still physically? And you were the original challenge beast. So I'm not asking if you're as able as you used to be, but I'm assuming that you probably could still kick my ass. So I would like to know, do you think you'd still be able to hold your own on the challenges against some of these, new young players who don't look like
the mentally strong challenges, yes. Physically, no.
I put my money on you, Terry.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Not the whole million, but I put some of it.
Well, seeing you won and I didn't, then thank you.
You mentioned before the money being mattering, and Bob was saying at least if I go out first, I get an all expense vacation paid. You guys all know that in your seasons, you automatically got 10 grand because everybody got that reunion show. That's something these new players don't get. They've just completely killed the reunion show, which is sad from a fan's perspective. It's really sad.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I feel really badly about that. That was one of the highlights. Everybody getting together for the live show.
I have to imagine that the reason that they've made a lot of these changes just comes down to brass tacks. They're saving 10 grand a person on live reunion. Exactly, Elizabeth. They're 29 days. They're getting rid of a lot of the reward challenges. How many? What'd you say?
26 days.
Oh, it's 26 now. Went from 30. Sorry, so 39 to 26. I mean, they're saving money left and right. That has to be the number one reason. And I would like to believe that season 50, which is going to be finally their first returning player season, and who knows what it'll be, Legends or whatever it is. I think they're not even going to change this damn format for that season. I think it's going to be 3 tribes of 6 and just like what we're talking about, 26 days. It's like, really? It's very odd that they're kicking in their heels for that, because they're going to have a bigger budget. Well, let's continue what we've been doing with going in order of so would you play again, especially knowing that this is what the game has evolved into, for better and worse?
I had a conversation with Jeff after the last season, and I said, Jeff, I think I should call it a day, man. This is like such a great run. They wanted me to be their coach. I led from start to finish. I really played a great game. And he said, as a producer, then I want you on every season. And we bring your name up on every returning season. And I get phone calls on every returning season. I tell him to stuff it usually. But he said, as your friend, he was like, I would never go on again, because you're never going to get better than this. So, my first response is no, I would not play again, because where would I go? Where would I go? I have to win in order to feel like I did better than I did the last time. But it's a little bit like the draft, they call you and then you put it into perspective and then you figure out if you're going to do it or not. So, you never say never, but at this point, I would say I would not like to play again.
Elizabeth, would you play again if you were asked?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
One of the most common questions people ask me was Survivor fun? Was Survivor real? And it's like in my head, however many years later, 6 years later, I'm like, I've glorified the experience. I mean, it freaking sucks. Like, it's so real and it's not fun. It's hard. But yet the chance to win $1 million again, yes, yes, yes.
I love it. So RC, if you were asked to play at any time in the future, would you pack your suitcase and go tomorrow?
I would 100% pack my bags tomorrow and go. Now, it might be a little bit hard with my husband, so I'd have to get him to agree to it. But I think I would go with like a different perspective this time. And I think I needed some separation after the first time to I wanted to just separate everything from Survivor. But now I think it would be really cool. And especially after COVID, like how awesome would it be to go on a beach and compete and have no troubles and no process and just have fun with no expectations this time. So call me.
And finally, Julie, would you play again?
I would. I definitely would play again too. I get asked this question all the time from friends or Survivor fans. I definitely would want to do it, but I would be concerned. Maybe Terry, you know more about this. I have heard that the returning player seasons can be really brutal in terms of pre-game alliances, everybody finding out who's going to be on, and maybe more so now in the later seasons where that's happened, where I'm not deep in the Survivor community, right? Like I came on the show when I was 45 as a mom. Like I didn't necessarily fit in with a lot of the people in my cast. And so afterwards, it's not like I'm, partying with people like, the young single people where it feels like they're all friends. And I don't know, like I was lucky enough, like where I had the whole experience. I made it to day 39. I obviously didn't win, but I really got everything out of it. And I would want to totally play again because now I feel like, oh my God, there's so many regrets that I have. I would change the way I played. I can always I can look back on it now and see that where I didn't see it in the beginning. But I also worry that it won't be the same experience. And especially if if coming back, it's just a different experience in general because everybody knows each other and everybody already has these like alliances formed. Like, I'm not sure I would be able to do so well, coming in as more of an outsider if that was the case.
Well, Terry, you're the only person left on this chat. We had a bunch before who had played 2 or even 3 seasons. Is a pre-game, is what she's saying accurate? Is it a huge disadvantage to you if you come in not really having pre-game alliances in second chance?
I think so. A lot of us from the early, old school, there used to be a lot of fundraising events that we would go to. So like you're sitting there, having beers and drinks with, like, that's where Bob and I met the first time. I think it was that Shriners thing in Louisville, Kentucky. I think that's when Bob and I met. But like we would meet each other and hang out. Like your significant others would be there and all that other stuff. So there was times where like, hey Bob, did you get the call? Oh yeah, I got the call. So what do you think? Blah blah blah. For some follow-on stuff. But it helps. But there's sometimes you're not talking to anybody, and sometimes you've met those people before, so it's kind of hit or miss. And yeah. Julie, I think she was right in that you can show up and be, God, nobody plus or minus 3 episodes, seasons were, and then you have Julie. It's like, well, geez, who is she? We don't, whatever, yeah, I never saw her at that fundraiser. Never had a beer with her or whatever. And, so it's hit or miss, kind of hit or miss.
And we all agree that if Julie's on another season with any of you, you guys will all be part of her pre-game alliance. Can we just agree to that?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. Julie, you're welcome.
I appreciate it.
I think it's safe to say everybody who joined this today, and there were a lot of people we know before this, I think it's safe to say you guys all have, I've seen over the years, there's the poker player alliance and there's this alliance and this season. I think it's safe to say this is going to be the Israel alliance.
For sure.
Well, thanks for putting up with us, Boaz. Appreciate it.
This has been my absolute pleasure. I am sorry for the amount of time it's taken to put together and to have, but this has honestly been, for as a fan, it's been awesome. And it was really fun for me to watch you guys reconnect even before we started recording. It's fun for me to connect with you guys throughout the process because I've had conversations with all of you personally. You all are invited to my house for a Shabbat dinner when you come to Los Angeles, and I mean it. I'll put my money on my wife's food because I don't cook where my mouth is. And honestly, thank you for standing up for people like me and Julie. The rest of you, I really appreciate your time. It's really, really meaningful and powerful. And I truly hope that if the people behind casting are watching this, and let's be honest, they will be for sure. I really sincerely hope that they will appreciate this truly, as I know Lynn Spillman certainly did when I told her about it. And I hope that this will certainly not negatively impact them choosing to ask any of you to come back. I hope, if anything, it increases that. So thank you.
Thank you. Shalom, my man. You guys have a great night. Well, cheers.
Bye.
And we'll talk soon.
Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Chosen Links. If you like what you heard, feel free to share this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our socials at Boaz Hepner on X and Facebook and at Hepner.Boaz on Instagram.